in London.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from the Kauffman Foundation, providing access to opportunities that help people achieve financial stability, upward mobility, and economic prosperity, regardless of race, gender, or geography. Kauffman.org. And from the Lodestar Foundation, inspired by the maxim that helping someone else less fortunate is a path to a happier, healthier, and more meaningful life. Learn more at lodestarfoundation.org.
It's Morning Edition on Radio IQ. I'm Jeff Bossert. Some of the long-held assumptions about population dynamics in Virginia are no longer true. Data from the U.S. Census Bureau and UVA's Weldon Cooper Center show more people moving out of Fairfax County and other northern Virginia locations than moving in. Almost all of the state's rural counties and many small and medium-sized cities that have lost population are now seeing more people arriving than leaving. Dwayne Yancey with Cardinal News has looked at the numbers. He spoke with Fred Eccles.
Dwayne, we're now at the point where rural in-migration in Virginia is pretty much statewide.
Virtually every rural locality in Virginia is now seeing more people move in than move out. There are only 4 rural counties that see more people moving out than moving in, and in 3 of them, their numbers are closing the gap.
The 4 rural counties not seeing in-migration, Dickinson, Wise, Buchanan, and Henry. Is there something identifiable about those counties that might stop people from moving in?
I can sort of answer half of that. Buchanan, Dickinson, Wise are all in coal country. Coal is in decline. And so, coal country has seen demographic challenges for a long time. Other counties in coal country are now seeing net in-migration. Those 3, the gap is closing. In a couple of years, they will probably, be in the plus side. Henry County is more of a mystery. Martinsville is now gaining population again. It's unclear, why Henry hasn't, but it may just be they just haven't caught up with that yet.
And this trend also spills over into some formerly struggling cities. You cite Danville as an example.
Danville has been rebuilding its economy. We now have 2 straight years now gaining population, and those numbers are increasing. And what is really driving that, people moving into Danville. Danville still has more deaths than births, but there's so many people moving into Danville that they make up for that. There are only 3 other cities in Virginia that have had more people move in than Danville. Those are Richmond, Suffolk, and Chesapeake.
Also gaining population now is Lynchburg, and you reveal a little-known fact about Lynchburg.
It is the only community on the western side of the state that has more births than deaths. Lynchburg is the baby capital of the western part of Virginia. The reason for that is Lynchburg is demographically one of the youngest cities in Virginia. We often forget that, but it's got the 5th youngest median age of any city in Virginia.
And it's worth noting it has lots of college students.
Yeah, not that these are college students having babies, but college students often, stick around, find employment nearby. So therefore, its median age tends to be younger.
This data set is not without its contradictions. There is one in Roanoke where the Census Bureau says population has declined. The Cooper Center says it has increased. Dwayne, are you prepared to step in and settle this question?
I'm not prepared to step in and settle this. I will just point out they use 2 different methodologies, and we have seen these disagreements before. A year ago, they disagreed about Fairfax County. Births and deaths are easier to count. There are birth certificates and death certificates. People moving in and out, it's a little squishier. The Census Bureau says people are moving out, and the Weldon Cooper Center says people are moving in.
Well, let's return for a moment to Fairfax County, the land of out-migration. Does anyone ask these people why they're leaving?
That's a good question, and if so, I'm not aware of it. I remember a journalist assigned to cover why so few people attending a certain event, and she was like, well, how do I interview people who aren't there?
Point taken. Dwayne Yancey is with cardinalnews.org. I'm Fred Eccles.
Cardinal News is a nonprofit independent online news organization covering Southside and Southwest Virginia.
Hi, this is RadioIQ Program Director Nicholas Yee. We've made a few changes to the RadioIQ schedule, and a few of your favorite shows may have moved to a different time slot. We hope the changes don't impact your listening habits too much and invite you to discover some of the new shows we hope you'll love. The new schedule, show descriptions, and a downloadable PDF are posted to our website, radioiq.org. And thank you so much for listening.
Support for Radio IQ comes from Bay Power Solutions, answering emergency calls for industrial generator needs, powering regional businesses, healthcare facilities, and more in any weather. Information at baydiesel.com. And from the Nature Conservancy, for nearly 70 years, dedicated to protecting Virginia's lands and waters, from the eastern shore to the Allegheny Highlands. Learn more at nature.org/Virginia.
A wintry mix hitting the region later on, rainy, mixing with snow, sleet, and freezing rains, particularly in higher elevations, and a little breezy, highs in the mid-30s to low 50s for Wise in the Bristol area, high today in Roanoke around 40 degrees. Precipitation remains possible tonight, lows in the low 30s to low 40s for the far southwest.
The U.S. and Israel's war with Iran has started to ripple through global energy markets.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Fidelity. A dedicated advisor can help create a comprehensive wealth plan. Investment minimums apply. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC.
From Marketplace, I'm Sabri Benishore, in for David Brancaccio. 3 ships have been attacked in the Persian Gulf. A refinery in Saudi Arabia was temporarily shut down after it was attacked by drones. Iran has said it has closed navigation through the Strait of Hormuz, and hundreds of ships are now sitting idle, unwilling or unable to pass through. Brent crude prices are up more than 8.8%. West Texas Intermediate is up 8%. Joining us to talk about it is Fernando Valley. He's Managing Director of Energy for the investment firm Hedge Eye Risk Management. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Oil futures, oil prices are up, supply and demand. What specific developments in this conflict are pushing those prices up right now?
I think there are a few aspects here. One, obviously, is the disruption, the immediate disruption that you're seeing. There are fewer tankers coming around the bend on the Strait of Hormuz, which is close to 30% of world oil production. That is a combination of both just pausing because of the attacks and not to have any risk. But then there's also the issues of insurance and several insurance companies canceling insurance for ships transiting in the Strait of Hormuz. And that kind of disruption would force the oil market to consider some form of rerouting. There's just not a lot of ways to reroute that much oil within a very short time frame.
How big of an oil producer is Iran, and where does that oil go? And is that oil not flowing now?
The oil is still flowing. There's been no news of an attack on Carter Island, which is their main export hub. It accounts for 80% of exports. Iran's a fairly large producer, close to 4 million barrels a day. They export just under 2 million barrels a day, which primarily goes to China. It's over 80% goes to Chinese refiners.
Is China still getting that oil? Is it paying more for it? What does that mean for China?
It's certainly going to pay a lot more for oil and natural gas that goes through the Strait of Hormuz. They are the largest importer of oil globally. The U.S., as you may know, produces 13.5 million barrels a day, roughly. With Canada, we're close to 18 million barrels a day of production versus our 20 million barrels a day of consumption. So we're fairly evenly balanced, whereas China still imports over 13 million barrels, sometimes as much as 15 million barrels a day of oil. A lot of that comes from the Middle East. Iran can account for over 10% of those volumes. Iran, because of the sanctions, was selling at a much lower price. China is now going to have to find a different supplier, potentially, or at a significantly higher cost than it was paying Iran. So the potential inflation shocks to China could be very significant the longer this lasts.
And how about us? How about in the U.S.? I mean, is this something that could trickle down to pump prices?
It almost certainly will. We have a more transparent mechanism to move oil prices into pump prices than China would. So it almost certainly will. If the conflict does not escalate from here and Iran doesn't have the strength to retaliate, then it's possible that we'll get prices to come down. Also worth mentioning, the U.S. has a lot of capacity to grow production at these higher prices. It doesn't have that capacity at $60 oil, but at 75, it certainly can, and that will alleviate some of the impacts on the pump for American consumers.
There is a lot of slack in the global oil market in the sense that OPEC could pump more, we could pump more. Does that kind of mitigate the medium-term potential consequences of this conflict?
Less so for OPEC, because most of OPEC's production growth would come through the Strait of Hormuz. So it doesn't necessarily help you to produce more in that region specifically. The U.S. does have the capacity to grow production, and in fairly short order, enough to alleviate, combined with strategic petroleum reserves, not just in the U.S., but in China as well. That can help put a cap on short-term oil prices.
Fernando Valley is Managing Director of Energy for investment firm Hedgeye Risk Management. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Great to be here with you.
All right, let's do the numbers. Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ futures are all down more than a full percent, with the Dow futures down 517 points. The yield on the 10-year Treasury is 4.01%.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by GEP. With GEP Key, Agentic AI, and GEP Smart Software, GEP is at the forefront in agentic procurement orchestration and autonomous supply chains. And by Palo Alto Networks. Palo Alto Networks delivers what's next in cybersecurity innovation to protect today's digital way of life. Learn more at paloaltonetworks.com.
We've got passengers stranded and international airline stocks slumping this morning after the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran. United is down almost 7% in pre-market trading. Air France down 10% yesterday, another percent today. India's Interglobe Aviation fell 6%. Asiana down 2%. Air carriers are being forced to cancel or reroute
be able to control that part
attacks and could face higher.
I'm sorry, can you say that
costs.
again?
Marketplace's Nancy Genzer has more on that.
We have we have a technology person in the chamber,
forcing airlines to
but I'm
cancel
going
some
to give
flights and leave
control of
passengers
this
stranded.
presentation,
The website Flight
part
Alert
of this
says
meeting
more than
to
1,000
you.
flights were canceled in the past 24 hours just at Dubai International Airport, with the airspace over the United Arab Emirates virtually empty. Emirates Airlines says it suspended all operations to and from Dubai until tomorrow. The airline says it's actively monitoring the situation and engaging with relevant authorities. Airports in Abu Dhabi and Doha are also affected, and there are ripple effects at other airports. Dubai International is one of the busiest airports in the world. Other airports in the region are hubs for passengers traveling between Asia and Europe. The Israeli airline El Al says it's scheduling rescue flights for stranded passengers that will take off as soon as Israel's main airport reopens and it gets approval from the Israeli government. I'm Nancy Marshall-Genzer for Marketplace.
And in New York, I'm Sabri Benishore with the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.
Hey, it's A. Martinez, and I want you to cast your mind back to all the road trips you've had with that car of yours. Of all the miles you've racked up on the odometer, how many hours were spent listening to public radio? If mileage has taken its toll over the years, donate that car, truck, or RV to this station. You'll help everyone put more miles on their radio with hours and hours of thought-provoking news and information. Here's how.
Go to radioiq.org. Click the vehicle donation banner at the top of the page.
You're listening to Radio IQ on WVTF Roanoke, WRIQ Charles City Richmond, WVTU Charlottesville, WVTW Charlottesville, WVTR Marion, WISE FM Wise, WQIQ Spotsylvania, WIUR Lexington, WEHC Emory, HD3 of WURV Richmond, and on 92.5 Richmond and 94.9 Fredericksburg. Radio IQ, a listener-supported community service of Virginia Tech, on your smart speaker and online at radioiq.org.
Welcome to NewsHour from the BBC World Service. I'm Regini Vaidyanathan. We'll bring you the latest on the US-Israel war with Iran. As strikes continue, we'll hear from some of the people affected.
Last night, it was horrendous. All day. It started at 7 a.m. Between 8 and 8:30, I counted, there were 17 explosions. People are worried.
Meanwhile, in Washington, the US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's been laying out the case for war.
The mission of Operation Epic Fury is laser focused. Destroy Iranian offensive missiles, destroy Iranian missile production, destroy their navy and other security infrastructure, and they will never have nuclear weapons.
We'll hear from Lebanon, the Persian Gulf, and look at the impact on oil prices. And we'll have an interview with Israel's President Isaac Herzog. That's all coming up after the BBC News.
BBC News with Emily Thomas. The US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has said Washington is carrying out a devastating mission in Iran aimed at destroying its missiles, its navy, and its nuclear ambitions. In a briefing at the Pentagon, he said the US had realistic ambitions and the operation would not lead to an endless war, but he refused to give a time frame.
Turns out the regime who chanted death to America and death to Israel was gifted death from America and death from Israel. This is not a so-called regime change war, but the regime sure did change, and the world is better off for it.
The head of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, Ali Larijani, said his country would fiercely defend itself and make its enemies sorry for what he called their miscalculation. The Israeli military says it's begun an additional...
Good morning and welcome to the March 2nd, 9 a.m. informal session of Roanoke City Council. City Council meetings will be televised live and replayed on RBTV Channel 3 on Thursdays at 7 o'clock p.m. and Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and video streamed through Facebook, through YouTube at Roanoke, VA. Council meetings are offered with closed captioning for the deaf or hard of hearing. This time I'll ask our clerk, Ms. McCoy, to please call the roll.
Mr. Volleson?
Here.
Ms. Powers? Here. Mr. Hagan?
Here.
Ms. Sanchez-Jones? Here. Vice Mayor McGuire?
Here.
Mr. Nash?
Here.
Mayor Cobb?
Here, and a quorum is present. We have a few items for action this morning for consideration regarding closed meetings in between today's sessions. The first is a communication from my office requesting that the council convene in a closed meeting to discuss vacancies on certain authorities, boards, commissions, and committees appointed by the council pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A1 Code of Virginia as amended. I need a motion and a second, please.
Move the motion.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmembers Powers and Nash. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Volleson?
Aye.
Ms. Powers?
Aye.
Mr. Hagan?
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez-Jones?
Aye.
Vice Mayor McGuire?
Aye.
Mr. Nash?
Aye.
Mayor Cobb?
Aye, and the motion passes. Second is a communication from the city attorney requesting that City Council convene in a closed meeting for the purpose of discussing possible disposition and acquisition of property in the southeast part of the city, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body, pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A3 Code of Virginia as amended. I'll entertain a motion and second.
Moved.
Thank you, Councilmembers Hagan and Nash. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Volleson?
Aye.
Ms. Powers?
Aye.
Mr. Hagan?
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez-Jones?
Aye.
Vice Mayor McGuire?
Aye.
Mr. Nash?
Aye.
And Mayor Cobb?
Aye, and the motion passes. A communication from the city attorney requesting that City Council convene in a closed meeting to consult with legal counsel pertaining to a possible breach of contract by a city contractor requiring the provision of legal advice pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A8 Code of Virginia. Motion and second, please.
Motion.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmembers Powers and Volleson. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Volleson?
Aye.
Ms. Powers?
Aye.
Mr. Hagan?
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez-Jones? Vice Mayor McGuire?
Aye.
Mr. Nash?
Aye.
And Mayor Cobb?
Aye, and the motion passes. A communication from the city attorney requesting that City Council convene in a closed meeting to consult with legal counsel regarding a certain legal matter requiring the provision of legal advice by the city attorney concerning a prospective business or industry or the expansion of an existing business or industry where no previous announcement has been made of the business or industry's interest in locating or expanding its facilities in the northwest area of the city of Roanoke, pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A5 Code of Virginia as amended. Motion and second, please.
I move the motion.
Second.
All right, thank you. Council members Powers and Nash. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Volleson?
Aye.
Ms. Powers?
Aye.
Mr. Hagan?
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones?
Aye.
Vice Mayor McGuire?
Aye.
Mr. Nash?
Aye.
And Mayor Cobb.
Aye, and the motion is adopted. We have a walk-on closed meeting, request that council convene in a closed meeting for the purpose of discussing possible acquisition of property in the southwest part of the city, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body. This is pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A3 Code of Virginia as amended. I'll entertain a motion and second.
Move the motion.
Thank you. Councilmembers Nash and Sanchez Jones. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Volleson?
Aye.
Ms. Powers?
Aye.
Mr. Hagan?
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones? Vice Mayor McGuire?
Aye.
Mr. Nash?
Aye.
And Mayor Cobb.
Aye, and the motion is adopted. We have a student here that there was some confusion about when folks can speak, but I'm delighted to welcome Tevin, who wanted to share a few words with us today, and I appreciate him taking time to come and be with us. Tevin, as you come up, you'll see a little box in the right-hand corner. There are 3 lights. Green means go, yellow means you have a minute left, and red means stop, but you'll have 3 minutes. Welcome, thank you. Go ahead.
Good morning, Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Tevin Davis. I am 14 years old. I attend James Madison Middle School. I'm here because the decisions you're making about school fundings aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet to us. They affect our everyday lives. I want to talk about the proposed cuts to the activity bus and lack of raises for teachers. First, the activity bus. Studies show that students who participate in extracurricular activities are more likely to have higher grades, better attendance, and lower dropout rates. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, students involved in sports and clubs are significantly less likely to skip school and more likely to go to college. But those opportunities only matter if students can actually get home. For many families, parents work evening shifts or multiple jobs. Not everyone has a second car. Some students rely completely on the activity bus to stay after school. Without it, they don't just lose transportation, they lose access. They lose their team, they lose their safe space. They lose something that motivates them to show up every day. For some kids, sports and clubs are what keep them focused and out of trouble. After school hours are statistically the peak time for juvenile crime and risky behavior. Activities give students structure, purpose, and positive mentors. Taking away the activity bus doesn't just save money, it creates barriers. And those barriers will affect students from working families the most. Now I want to talk about teachers. Teachers already spend hundreds of dollars of their own money every year on classroom supplies. Many work far beyond their contracted hours. Yet in many districts, raises haven't kept up with inflation, meaning teachers are effectively making less than they were years ago. When teachers feel unsupported or underpaid, it leads to burnout. Teacher burnout is one of the biggest reasons educators leave their profession. And when good teachers leave, students lose stability and consistency. Most teachers truly care about us, but they are human. When people feel unappreciated and overwhelmed, it affects their energy and patience. Students can feel that, especially the students who are trying their best. We need teachers who feel valued so they can support us the way we need them to. A supported teacher creates a supported student. This isn't just about buses and raises. It's about fairness. It's about equal opportunities. It's about whether students from all backgrounds get the same chance to succeed. You often say we are the future, but if we are the future, then our education should be protected, not reduced. Please think about the long-term impact of these decisions. The cost of cutting support now may be much greater later, and lost potential, lost motivation, and lost opportunities. We are not asking for luxury. We are asking for access. We are asking for support. We are asking to be invested in. Thank you for your time and for listening to me this morning.
Thank you, Tevin. I appreciate you coming today. Thank you. That was well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to now recess our council meeting to move into our legislative committee, and I'm pleased to recognize the chair of our legislative committee, Vice Mayor McGuire.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everyone. I am delighted to lead our legislative meeting today, and we will be joined. We have some guests, but first we need to call ourselves to order and take roll. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Hagan?
Here.
Ms. Sanchez Jones? Mayor Cobb?
Excuse me, here.
Mr. Nash? Mr. Volleson? Ms. Powers? Ms. Appel? Ms. Trigg? And Chairman McGuire.
Here. Thank you. All right, we have a quorum. I will first put forward a motion that we approve our minutes from our February 2nd meeting.
So moved. Second.
Okay, have a motion and a second. Could you please call the roll, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Hagan?
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones? Mayor Cobb?
Aye.
Mr. Nash?
Aye.
Mr. Volleson?
Aye.
Ms. Powers? And
Aye. Thank you, Madam Clerk. I am delighted we have with us today from McGuire Woods our state legislative lobbyist, Preston Bryant, who's also going to be joined today, our first time that council has heard from our federal legislative consultants, Mr. Clayton Cox and Scott Binkley will also be joining us. We are, as Mr. Bryant will go over, he has a great presentation for us that I saw was 20+ pages long, sir, so I'm not going to take too much time. I want to let you jump right in to give us updates on our priorities. February 17th was crossover, so we do not have a lot of time left in the legislative session. So if you are there, Mr. Bryant, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, if that sounds good to you, I will turn it over to you to jump into the presentation you have for us today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Recognizing your time, we will move through this pretty efficiently. First, I want to say thank you to Roanoke for having such a good turnout for Local Government Day a few weeks ago. It was very helpful. And I also want to thank Ms. Moore and Ms. Carini for continuing to be such good partners in communications as we have gone through this quick session. Next slide. Thank you. Today is day 48 of 60, so we're entering our, we have 2 full weeks left. So a lot of that is tidying up of bills that have been previously heard and the budget conferees doing their negotiations. So will dominate the next couple of weeks. Next slide. On the housing front, and my presentation follows the committee's adopted legislative agenda by topic. Congratulations on House Bill 180. House Bill 181 from Delegate Rasool. This has put a reenactment clause on it in the House. So the Senate is taking up this bill, the Senate committee, later this morning. You can see it passed out of the House pretty overwhelmingly, but it will be taken up again later this morning. Congratulations on House Bill 474 with Delegate Rasool. This continues or expands your very successful TAP partnership. It's statewide in application, raising the cap from $75,000 to $125,000. So that passed unanimously out of the Senate, and it's on its way to the governor. Next slide. You'll remember, I won't spend a lot of time on this, both the House and Senate bill, they deferred to other House and Senate bills that take a different approach to the emergency custody order transportation matter. The House bill and the Senate bill from Delegate Hayes and Senator Lucas really permit retired law enforcement officers to be employed to do this type of public safety transportation. I can say that the sheriff's departments, I'm not speaking for your sheriff's department, but the Virginia Sheriff's Association and the state police, and the Chiefs of Police Association, they typically don't like these non-public safety related, directly related transportation duties. So this is the approach they have chosen to take. I'm not convinced that it's the answer to the problem, but we will see. Next slide. You recall that there was no legislation introduced on the Transportation Museum. Next slide. On the budget, there was no money in the House budget on the downtown redevelopment plan from Delegate Rasool. However, the Virginia Tech Korean School of Medicine expansion was included, proposed by Governor Youngkin, and the House and the Senate budgets maintained that provision, that funding provision, and it's included in what's called the 2026 capital construction pool. The exact number, dollar figure, they don't advertise for competitive bid reasons, but the project is included in the budget. So congratulations on that. Next, on there was no budget amendment introduced on the Amtrak proposal. I think your Economic Development Department has more information on that. And others represent the Airport Commission, but you can see that there was no successful budget amendments on the airport matters. And I think the Airport Commission may have additional information behind that. Next slide. The city had expressed interest in urban tree canopy legislation, as it has the last few years. I'll simply say that House Bill 549 adds for residential parcels that are 2 to 5 units per acre, it adds a 25% required tree canopy. If it's a per acre, 2 or fewer units, 1 or 2 units per acre, it's a 30% requirement, but it's permissive. It allows localities to adopt such an ordinance if you so choose. Next slide. Various solar siting bills are passing this year. I won't get into the nitty-gritty details, but the first one, House Bill 590, its Senate counterpart, it has the Department of Energy establishing an internet-based platform that will aid in local government permit processing and solar contractor obtaining their permits. So it's kind of an efficiency. It has a year before this kicks in, July 1 of 2028, or 2 years actually. So to give time to launch the program. There are other solar facility bills being passed regarding ground-mounted solar facilities in ag and commercial industrial areas and such. And then there's House Bill 395 at the bottom that actually prevents a locality from prohibiting what's called plug-in solar. These are new devices that are connected to just a regular outlet. And so this puts restrictions on localities to actually not allow these small portable devices. Next slide. And I'll just, House Bill 1234 is again permissive, and it allows localities to include in their land development ordinances requirements to install solar canopies on 50% of commercial parking areas under certain circumstances. So that bill was passed last year and vetoed, and it's passing again this year. Next slide. We've already discussed these constitutional amendments. I won't go into them again, but as you know, they are passing, and they have passed, and the governor has signed them. Next slide. And the same for these constitutional amendments. They have been passed, and the governor has, I think the governor has already signed these as well, or will soon sign them. Next slide. There was no legislation introduced on this, as you know. Next slide. And I will say that this continues to be a matter of interest. There is passing this year legislation that would allow localities to adopt a 1% local sales tax for K-12 school construction and renovation. Delegate Rasool has the much preferred bill. There was a Senate bill that has actually been adopted into the Senate version of the budget that is much less flexible than Delegate Rasool's very good bill. And so there are discussions going on now in negotiations. These will be among negotiations among budget conferees, but our hope is to have the budget language reflect as much of Delegate Rasool's bill as possible so that local governments will have as much flexibility as possible on how to use the 1% sales tax if it's adopted at the local level. Next slide. And collective bargaining continues to be a matter of interest, if not concern, great concern among many local governments. There are two bills, a House and a Senate bill. They are a little bit different. They will go to a conference committee to work out those differences. As you know, Mr. Chairman, the current law allows localities to opt in to collective bargaining if they choose. It's a locality by locality decision. This bill would remove that and remove the prohibition and allow it, any locality would require any locality statewide to engage in collective bargaining. Many local governments have done a fiscal impact analysis on this, and it's costing anywhere from tens of millions to hundreds of millions per locality. The Public Employee Relations Board that the bill establishes is all powerful. It has binding arbitration authorities. They can sue you if they think you are not negotiating in good faith. The bill won't take effect until July 1 of 2028, but the governor can appoint members of the board as early as this October. This is a bill to keep your eye on, and if you haven't conducted a fiscal impact analysis on it, you may wish to do so to better understand its impact on your community. Next slide. There are various photo speed monitoring bills. There are three bills in particular, the House Bill 994, the House Bill 1220, and the Senate Bill 84, that we're still seeking to clarify or have sovereign immunity provisions added to them. But something is going to pass this year in various ways. And I know this is of great interest to the city, as has been articulated by Ms. Carini. So we've been going over these bills, but sovereign immunity provisions seem to be the biggest concern at present, and VML and VACO are both working on these as well. So with that, Mr. Chairman, before I turn it over to my McGuire Woods Consulting federal government colleagues, Scott Binkley and Clayton Cox, let me stop and see if there are questions on the General Assembly matters.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bryant. I also want to, for our clerk, acknowledge that our school board chair and legislative committee member, Chair Appel, has joined us. And then thank you. I had a couple of questions, Mr. Bryant, but so did some of my colleagues, I think, before we move on. Mr. Volleson.
Yes, Mr. Bryant, if you could go back to the cannabis legislation. I know that there had been different versions of the bill that were working their way through the legislature. Could you update us on what's going on there?
Yes. Did I include this in the slides?
It's underneath the constitutional amendments.
Oh, okay. That's right. I skipped over that. I apologize. So yes, there are a couple of versions of this. You can see that the House bill and the Senate bill passed. The House bill has, in terms of local sales taxes, a 1 to 2% local sales tax, and the state has a 6% sales tax, and it goes to effect later this year, November of 2026. The Senate bill is a little different. It allows a 3% local sales tax and an almost 13% state sales tax on retail cannabis sales, and it goes to effect next year. Both bills broadly respect local government zoning powers and your ability to establish distances, for example, between retail shops, those kinds of things. So we protected, for the most part, all local government zoning powers on these retail shops. There's only a certain number of retail, I'm trying to remember now, retail shops that can be statewide. I want to say 350, don't hold me to that. So the state will regulate exactly how many licenses are issued. But these are going to a conference committee to work out mostly the sales and sales tax differences and the effective dates.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. I think
sorry,
we had been hoping
skipped over
for an ability to opt in, but I think that ship has sailed. So was that what you were asking about also, or?
I was more interested in which of the policies is kind of leading, whether it's the 3% or the 1% to 2%, which I, of course, would prefer the 3%.
Yeah, I'm not sure. First of all, yes, the ship has sailed on the opt-in. That has not been a major consideration for a while now. This is a statewide in nature. VML and VECO have continued to argue for their current position. Longstanding position is local option and to opt in, but neither bill allows that provision. As to the question, which sales tax provision, local sales tax amount is the leading candidate, I don't know. Those discussions are being held by the conferees, the would-be conferees themselves. We're keeping our ear to the ground on it.
Thank you, Mr. Preston. I just had one other question, and it was kind of on the budget amendments that we asked for, seeing as we didn't get any of those. I was just wondering if you could speak as to what the budget situation is like this year, and if there's anything that we could possibly do, well, I guess before the session ends, but also in following years.
Yes, sir. On the budget amendments, well, broadly speaking, the House and Senate and Governor, frankly, are rather aligned in taking a measured approach to the budget. Neither the House nor the Senate in their respective budgets are starting a lot of new programs that require ongoing funding. The major big ticket drivers of this budget is Medicaid. The state is to pick up, and the state is picking up the tab, so to speak, on the federal Medicaid cuts. That's to Virginia. That's $3.2 billion over the next 3 years. On the federal cuts to SNAP and the state having to pick up that tab, that's at least $180 million a year going forward. So those are the big drivers on this. The state is also noticing that the state economy is showing both signs of slowdown and resilience. We're still running in terms of revenues a little ahead of year-to-date revenues, but they're also seeing manufacturing slowdowns, for example, and the joblessness, the unemployment rate is, while still below the national average, Virginia now is not creating jobs to the extent they thought they would at this time. So they're seeing some clouds on the horizon while also enjoying still a bit of year-to-date growth. So given those mixed signals, they are taking a very conservative approach to budgeting. And to his credit, Governor Youngkin in his introduced budget, he left a very healthy unappropriated balance. Usually when a governor presents his or her budget, there's usually a $10 to $20 million unexpended balance to hold back. Governor Youngkin proposed $300 million unexpended balance, which portends that he too, as he was leaving office, was seeing some clouds on the horizon and left the legislature a healthy unexpended balance just in case. So that's the general background on the budget and the fairly conservative approach that they're taking in terms of capital projects. There are some new capital projects. They're mostly state-related capital projects. Even at the university level, which usually has a big demand on capital projects, For the most part, they have limited these to life and health and safety related improvements, but I won't say that there have been a few capital projects that have been included this year on the university side. And again, the Virginia Tech Korean School of Medicine has maintained its expansion funds that the governor Youngkin proposed, and the House and Senate continue to maintain.
All right, thank you for that. I think it's, when we were up there in Richmond, they really talked about how the Medicaid, that one big beautiful bill, is turning into just that. It's a giant bill that Virginia now has to pay. So I know that it's been a very tight budget season, so I appreciate that context for everybody.
Yes, sir. So, Mr. Chairman, that's completes my presentation, and if appropriate, we would turn it over to Clayton Cox and Scott Binkley to discuss the federal actions.
Yes, very quickly, we have a couple other questions, Mr. Bryant. Thank you. That was a good
I'm sorry.
question.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yes.
Councilmember Volleson. I'll turn it to Councilmember Nash.
For the legalization of cannabis sales, for the Senate bill that has the state share of being about 13% and the local being 3%, I just did the math for that because I had to go to ChatGPT to help me do that math. But on $10 million in sales for the local portion, that would only be $300,000. So that's not a lot of money for the localities that are going to have to deal with any type of negative direct impacts from the legalization of cannabis sales here on the local level. What's the justification for it being that low and the state portion being so high? I mean, I get they might have to do like a regulatory board and body and things of that nature at the state level. So that's personnel costs. I get that. But what are you hearing in Richmond about this? And are other localities kind of beating the drum? Because this is pretty, I mean, we're getting kind of ripped off, in my opinion.
Yes, I haven't heard a lot of specific discussion about the local sales tax amount. VML and VACO have been mostly concerned, I think, with preserving local government zoning and land use options, which are pretty healthy in the bill. But I've not heard a lot of discussion at VML or VACO, for example, about the local sales tax amount. But I can find out and report back through Ms. Moore and Ms. Carini.
That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I'll do that.
Question. Thank you. Councilmember Powers.
Yes, and also when you're to Councilman Nash's comments on the sales tax of the cannabis on the state side, are we hearing anything that they're going to do any more funding on the education side? Because they're going to get a lot of money. And, schools should be a part of that. And I haven't seen anywhere in anything that I've read where they've mentioned that. So are you hearing anything, or do you know anything about that?
About what element of education funding generally, or more specifically?
Well, would education be getting any part of that 10%? I guess they'd get to keep 10%, and the localities would get 3%. Is that right? Or is it a 16%? It's a little hard to understand.
Two options. I guess the question is, will any of the tax revenue from cannabis sales go towards education?
Not directly to my knowledge. It would be up to the local government to obviously determine how to use its, say, 3%, for example, and how to divvy that up at the local level. I will say that I think there is, this is the year for K-12 re-benchmarking, and there's perhaps the schools can speak better to it, but it's 900 million or more. I can't remember the exact figure, going to schools statewide for K-12 re-benchmarking, but I will reserve and let the school officials there speak more to that.
Thank you. Any other questions? I had one question and then a closing comment before we jump over to our federal to hear from our federal team. And that was just, I was reading, we referenced in our legislative agenda, not super specifically, but hoping to have some guardrails put in around data centers and the rapid expansion of those around the Commonwealth. And I thought that I saw that one of the ways that this legislature was balancing the budget was by starting to ask data centers to pay their fair share in sales tax, and that there was going to be about $1 billion potentially on the table if that went through. Could you help me out with that, Mr. Bryant, where that stands and if that is when that would take effect?
Very good question, and that is a late-breaking major issue around the budget this year. So for more than 10 years, Virginia has had in place a state sales tax exemption for data centers, and this would be on the servers and other equipment that they purchase that goes within the data center, that makes up the equipment, the computers, the servers, and other such equipment that make up the guts of a data center. That sales tax exemption has now grown to $1.6 billion a year, which means that's $1.6 billion that the Commonwealth is not receiving because of the sales and use tax exemption. That sales tax exemption statutorily is to run until 2035. In an Amazon Web Services case, Amazon invested some $35 billion in Virginia a couple of years ago. Their sales tax exemption will run until 2040 and then 2050, so long as they continue hitting certain marks. When the Senate version of the budget came out, it had, quite unexpectedly, and caught everyone by surprise, going cold turkey in FY27 on that sales tax exemption. They cut it off. They stop it. And the $1.6 billion, therefore, in so-called newfound money, the Senate budget proposes to use most of that on transportation-related matters, a little bit of it in the first year, FY27, if I remember correctly, on some education matters, but for the most part, it goes to transportation, if I remember correctly. The House bill does not have, the House budget does not have such a cold turkey cutoff of the sales and use tax exemption prior to 2035. So this would be a significant negotiation point between the House and Senate budget conferees. Senator Lucas, who chairs the House Finance and Appropriations Committee, feels very strongly, apparently, about cutting off and stopping the sales tax exemption for data centers, the $1.6 billion. So we will see where that goes. It was a significant policy and dollar change in the Senate budget.
Thank you, sir. I think that's great news personally, and hats off to Senator Lucas, and hope that that works its way through. I think that's a common sense, great way to hold data centers accountable and raise the money that we desperately need. Before we jump over to the federal updates, I'll just want to point of privilege end with a comment that there has been, I think, a lot of misinformation around what this legislature has been up to with regard to who they're looking out for, and questions around their affordability agenda, and who are they looking out for, middle class Virginians or the super wealthy. And I've seen a lot of accusations thrown around that this legislature is raising taxes on lower income Virginians and working class and middle class Virginians. And I just want to end with a quote that I saw that I hope puts some of that to rest. And that is, quote, "I can't tell you how much I appreciate that there are no tax increases in this budget." That is from Republican Senator Richard Stewart of Caroline County. And I believe that our House of Delegates member McNamara also gave comments on the floor to that effect. So I just think it's important to put that out there, that there are not actually tax increases on the table being passed by this legislature, certainly not on the backs of working class and middle class people. So I just think that as we We and then everyone listening go back out into the community as this state legislative session comes to an end. I really encourage you to check out the facts and look for yourselves on what's coming out of that, and don't believe everything you hear. So with that little soapbox out of the way, I would like to turn it please to Mr. Clayton Cox and Scott Binkley, our federal legislative consultants. And I also want to say thank you to Ms. Bohr and Ms. Carini and Mr. Volleson for your work, everyone's work on this, but you were able to do a pre-meeting with our team, and I was not able to join that. So thank you for that. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Binkley and Mr. Cox.
Thank you so much. And you can go back to the yeah, there you go. We'll start here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the council for having us today. It's a pleasure to be with you all, and it's a pleasure to work with you. As we're just getting started here with our engagement at the federal level, we wanted to take some time to introduce ourselves first and give you a little bit of background on ourselves. And so I'm Scott Binkley. I'm here in Washington, D.C. today. I'm a Senior Vice President with McGuire Woods Consulting's Federal Affairs Group. I've been with this firm for about 7 years. Prior to that, have worked in Republican politics, both here in D.C. and elsewhere on political campaigns around the country. I started my career in Washington, D.C. with a member of Congress from my home state of Georgia named Tom Price. Started at the bottom in his office and worked up to hold a number of different legislative positions before leaving his office to do political campaigns for both U.S. House, Senate, and governor's races across the country. Came back to D.C. To work at a number of Republican political organizations, and before doing multiple other campaigns across the country, and then finally joining McGuire Woods, as I mentioned, about 6 or 7 years ago. But based on the time that I spent on Capitol Hill and throughout different government organizations here in Washington, D.C., help clients at the federal level, specifically local government clients, harness things like federal funding, go after competitive grants. And Clayton and I do that in a bipartisan fashion for a number of local government clients that we have the privilege of representing from around the country. And so that's a little bit of my background and a little bit about the work we do. We're excited to kind of get underway with you all, as we'll share later in the presentation. We have a plan to come down to Roanoke and visit and see all these things that we're going to talk about today as far as your federal funding priorities and these priority projects around the city. So with that, I will kick it over to Clayton to tell you a little bit more about himself.
Hello, everyone, and thanks, Scott, for kicking it off. It's good to be with you all. Really excited to work with the city. Very appreciative of the folks who are identified. Councilman Volleson, also Vanessa and Laura for being such big helps, getting us acclimated and getting us up to speed on the city's priorities. I think just to get my background real quick, like Scott, I'm from Georgia, moved up to DC in 2010 to work for Senator McCaskill, then moved into Democratic politics, was a fundraiser for President Obama. Worked briefly for about 7 months for Senator Warner on his reelect in 2014. So I got familiar with Virginia politics, did a little bit of traveling in the state, and then went over to work for Secretary Clinton's campaign in 2016, and then headed to the DNC again in 2017 to work for the former Labor Secretary, Tom Perez. When he became DNC chair, I was his senior advisor for a little bit, and then eventually became the head of national fundraising. So in that time in national politics, of running fundraising for the DNC, of being one of the top fundraisers for President Biden's campaign in 2020, and then bleeding over a little bit into President Biden's first term, I was able to get a good degree of contacts throughout the country in elected office and on the Hill. And so using that experience, came to McGuire Woods about 5 years ago and started this practice with Scott. And sort of local governments are something that's a real centerpiece to the work that we do. And I think just to give you a 30,000 foot sense of sort of how we work, We generally focus highly on bringing grants in, bringing in earmarks and other programs to help our clients. We also do a fair amount of helping you understand the current lay of the land, as our colleague Preston does on the state level, with different policies that are coming down the pike, and sort of understanding what's going on the Hill, as it can be overwhelming with everything going on in the news. So we try and filter that information and be your sort of anytime you need it source on what's going on. And I think the sort of final thing we do, besides identifying grant and other sort of revenue streams, understanding what's going on, is provide your sort of day in, day out interfacing with your elected officials. So with your senators, with the congressional map that could potentially change, making sure that we're interacting with them and then keeping them up to date on all the work that the city's doing. I think one thing we have found is a lot of our local government clients do such tremendous work, have so many exciting things going on within their county or city or town, that they can often get, sort of caught up with the day-to-day of all the things going on, because you guys are where the rubber meets the road. And so we try and help tell that story. We try and help you zoom out and make sure that folks know all the exciting stuff that's going on. So that's a good amount of background on us, on our sort of practice. You will mainly interface with Vanessa and Laura and be sort of interacting with them a good amount. But as things pop up, we will be seeing you. As Scott said, we'll be making a trip down in May, and we look forward to being there. To dig into sort of what we have. Next slide, please. So I think first things first, like we said, our sort of North Star is helping identify revenue, identify funds for your programs. One of the centerpieces of that are what's called congressionally directed spending in the Senate. In the House, it's called community project funding. You probably know it as earmark funding. So we try and help you identify earmarks and get those earmarked funds from your congressional delegation. We just wrapped up the first round. We just wrapped up a round of earmarks that came through with the end of January budget deal that was cut. In that FY26 federal budget, Roanoke received $1 million earmark for the Biotech Accelerator Project. One project that we had submitted that got to the Appropriations Committee but did not make the final cut was the In-River Kayak Park. We're going to work on trying to get that resubmitted for FY27, which if we were in a normal sort of legislative calendar, all of the appropriations would have happened at the end of the fall. And then we would sort of have a reprieve for a few months and then go after new projects in the spring. Obviously, those budget deals came in at the end of January. We still have a shutdown in Homeland Security, so things are still in flux. So a lot of the earmark portals and ways to submit those projects are opening up again now for FY27. So we sort of just wrapped up one and we'll start another concurrently. And so the In-River Kayak Park is something that we will go after. I'll let Scott talk about some of the other projects. We've been working with Vanessa and Laura on making sure that we are sourcing projects from your department heads, from others, to try and get out there and try and look for ways to find federal funds to help accelerate some of those projects. And I'll let Scott talk about those.
As Clayton mentioned, there's a number of different ways to go after federal funds. As Clayton mentioned, one avenue is through the congressionally directed spending or community project funding process, or earmarks, which that process is ramping up now, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. There are competitive grant opportunities for things like roads and bridges, and we'll talk more about that as well. And these are all avenues that we help clients isolate and then match, the appropriate project to the appropriate avenue. Of course, we don't want to submit a congressionally directed spending request for a priority project that could go after grant funding, and so we're going to help distill down the list of priority projects. And we've already had an opportunity to meet with some of you all And we encourage you, to reach out to us. And when we come down there in May, we'll make time to meet with all of you that would like to meet. We've met with the executive leadership team as well and had their input. And one thing that we know from working with other local government clients is there's a lot of, constituencies. There's a lot of folks with, deep subject matter expertise as it relates to these projects. And they become kind of, pet projects almost. And so we want to make sure that we hear from everybody and everybody has an opportunity to say, hey, I'd really like to see federal funding for this priority project that I've been working on for a long time. So we want to solicit feedback from everybody, and that process is ongoing. So please don't see this list and say that, if your priority project isn't on here, that certainly isn't an omission. This is an opportunity to provide that feedback, and that process will go on for some time. Like I mentioned, the congressionally directed spending process is heating up. Your senators have just released, I think as of this morning or over the weekend, have just released their portal and some guidance for the types of projects they'd like to see submitted, and we can go into that more in a minute. Your member of Congress has not yet put up his guidance. But I think that, and we can talk a little bit more about this as well. I think that your senators are a little bit more active in the community project funding department than your House members. But to go through this federal funding priorities working list, of course, the in-river kayak park is something that we've heard a lot about. This was submitted for a congressionally directed spending request for FY26. And unfortunately, while it was put forward, it wasn't then included in the final bill. And so I think this is something, obviously, this has been well socialized with your senators, and we will continue to do that. I think, I assume that it would be something that a staff or just a district person for one of your senators or House members might like to come and see in person. And so that's something that we can also help facilitate is when there's a priority project that might be cool for a staff member to come see firsthand. We can help facilitate that with the relationships that we have. The airport is another that we've heard a lot about as we've begun our conversations with you all, both the runway extension and then the new terminal building. This is actually something that we've helped work on for other local government clients where airport needs were a priority. There are competitive grants out there for airport funding. And so I think that one, it may be one that we recommend that you go more towards the competitive grants than the congressionally directed spending process. But a lot of this, as you all know, sometimes depends on where you are in the process. If things like a master plan have been done and things like that. We've heard a lot from the council members that we've talked to in the executive leadership team about public transit and how important that is to the community, and certainly something that can be done either through congressionally directed spending or through some DOT grants that are available. And then affordable housing funding, something that we've heard a lot about. And I know that there is some concern among local governments about HUD cuts. And so obviously want to preserve, status quo level funding, but also, of course, there can always be additional funding that's helpful for this, for those efforts in affordable housing. So those are some of the priority projects that we've heard. But again, I want to just stress that, we welcome an opportunity to talk to you about other projects. And this is a, working list, not to be, considered final or complete or anything like that. And again, what we will then do is take these priority projects that we hear from you all and match them with either, things that we think are great submissions for an earmark request, or if we know of competitive grant opportunities or other federal funding opportunities to go after for these projects. I think we'll move on to the next slide, and then we'll answer any questions or hear any other projects that need to be added to the list at the end. But Clayton, do you want to go over some of these important upcoming dates?
Sure thing. We're really excited to work with y'all, and I know we're still getting acclimated, getting ourselves wrapped, getting our hands around everything and all of your agenda items. But a few things we've sort of identified as important dates or things to have on your radar. Number one, the community project funding / congressionally directed spending earmark projects will be due this month. We don't have dates yet. Your portals are open. The portals are where you fill out a form requesting earmark funding. Those are open for your senators. Senators Kane and Warner do them together. But we do not have a due date yet. We don't have them yet from Congressman Klein or Griffith or folks in the area. So we are anxiously awaiting to know when those projects will be due. We would expect mid-month into the month. The other thing we have on our radar is March 18th. We've got some of your members, I believe Councilman Volson will be there for the National League of Cities Conference. And we will set up some meetings, say hello to some of our congressional delegation. And then May 4th, we will come down, see y'all in person and do some touring around the city. And of course, open to meet with anybody, sit down with anybody that you'd like, and look forward to being there. But those are some of the dates we have on our radar. Obviously, right now, you mainly heard about appropriations, you heard about money. That is what this time of the year is. As we move on throughout the year, we'll be doing things sort of more, a little more policy focused, looking at grants that are popping up, looking at things that are happening in Congress, although with it being a midterm year, probably not going to be very productive Congress, but we will keep you in the loop. If you hear about legislation or bills you want us to track, please send those our way. I think at this point have a pretty good sense of what's going to be a priority for leadership and what's not. You have a very, very tight margin in the House right now. So I would say the likelihood of a lot of legislation getting done is pretty low. But again, earmarks, appropriations are sort of spring. And then as the year moves on, we sort of stay on top of those earmarks, stay on top of those projects, while also looking towards other policies that are coming down the pike and make sure that we keep you read in. And then we also make sure we are up to date on the administration's activities and the things they're doing with rulemaking and federal funds that are coming down, since Roanoke is a large recipient. But that's kind of the lion's share of what we wanted to discuss today. If you go to the next slide, you'll got our contact information if you ever need anything. Happy to take some questions. And like I said, we're not fully up to speed on everything, but we're excited about working together and getting some of these projects funded and getting Roanoke's agenda out there.
Thank you very much, Scott and Clayton. That was super helpful. I think we have a couple of questions. I just want to say really quickly, again, thank you for your work on this. We definitely look forward to having you down in May. I will note that our next legislative committee meeting is April 6th. I really appreciate you walking through that priorities, working list of priorities. And some of my colleagues before today's meeting did have some questions about exactly what the process would look like for us as a council to give feedback on that, possibly adding or subtracting things to that list. And what I heard you say, sir, is that ASAP, sort of TBD in March, was the deadline for that. So my homework will be to circle back, Councilman Volson and I, with our colleagues to, as quickly as possible, get you some feedback on that ahead of the April 6th next legislative meeting, and then certainly before you get here. And so would it be okay, what's the best way to transmit that to you, just to email it over to both of you directly?
We created a form for Ms. Boer and I guess now City Attorney Creaney to send around. And so that sort of had, I believe that went to your department heads or directors. And that sort of was like an intake form for projects. So that's one thing that's been sent around, but we can obviously reach out to us directly.
That's great. Thank you very much. And I think our first question comes from our Mayor Cobb.
Thank you both very much. I just wanted to see if you could give us any updates on the status of HUD funding, particularly related to CDBG, Community Development Block Grants. And then the second part of that is related to the freeze on housing vouchers. We're very concerned about the potential impacts of eliminating CDBG funding, which I believe the president has proposed. And we've had nearly a 2-year now freeze on housing vouchers, which is also concerning for our area. But I wondered if you had any updates on that and any advice on how we might proceed to advocate for a change in that approach.
I'm happy to take a quick cut and then kick it to you, Clayton, if there's anything I miss. I was going to begin. I believe that the budget that included this most recent round of earmarks that Clayton was mentioning from earlier this year, the one that they just kind of negotiated and passed. I believe the good news is that that budget did not include some of the most drastic cuts that the president had proposed. Though I understand that it's still a concern that if he obviously had his way, that HUD would look very differently and would be funded very differently. I think that we ought to prioritize a meeting with either HUD or one of our a good member on a committee of jurisdiction when we're up here in March, and kind of really dig into that issue. Clayton, anything else to add?
So the president's budget last year, we don't have the president's budget yet for this year, but the president's budget last year had some pretty, I think, drastic cuts. A lot of those were reversed there sort of seems to be this overall pattern of president's budget has, I think, some bigger cuts. The sort of House version of the bill reverses some of them, but not fully. The Senate version of the appropriations bill basically reverses everything and puts it flat. That seems to be what's happening. There's also this piece of legislation that's out there, the 21st Century Housing Act, that we've heard from some counties and cities that they're concerned about, which basically moves around how some funding is awarded and would result in a cut for certain cities or counties that do not basically meet a federal standard for building housing quickly, and it cuts some of the CDBG funds. We're not so sure that bill will necessarily pass. It did gain some steam, so we'll continue to monitor that. But I would agree with Scott that I think sort of engagement is important, and then the other piece is we've recommended for other local government clients to essentially make like a one pager of every sort of federal program you participate in, just so you have it there to do sort of an audit, and then to secondly take that information and give it to your members of Congress and to say, these are the things we're worried about. These are the programs that we receive. And there seems to be, again, another pattern where cuts, other things come down, there's a bipartisan pushback, and then things seem to be reversed. So I think we should get that in front of our delegation, let them know the local impact. And if we can get people on both sides of the aisle, making calls and doing outreach on our behalf, that's usually a good way to help get things turned back on or get things reversed. But this issue was flagged for us, and we'll continue to sort of dig in a little deeper on it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other questions?
I don't personally have a question, but I would just say that I think for us as a council, it would be really important and interesting for us to align our ask, perhaps with some of the items on our CIP that were taken off, like Fire Station 2 that's proposed to be road, the library, things of that nature. I mean, even if it's not the full dollar amount that we get, if it's something that can help offset the cost down the road, I think that would be especially worthwhile. So I just want us to remember and consider that.
Absolutely.
Very good point. Thank you.
If I can ask
Councilman Volleson.
just one other question for both of y'all. One of the things that we've started to talk about here in the city is becoming a gateway community for national parks. And I was just wondering if you could give, if there's any information you can give about how we should start doing that, or how we should, what that process looks like.
We can dig into that. I'll be honest, we've been had too much familiarity with the sort of gateway program or with the national parks, but that's something I think we can get back to you ASAP.
Yeah, and I know that's more of a policy side thing that anyway, but I just wanted to flag that for future discussion.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Volleson, good question. And I think there is a lot of interest in that, pursuing that. All right, well, any other questions from council for Mr. Cox or Mr. Binkley? All right, well, gentlemen, thank you both very much. We will be in touch. I don't know if we'll talk to you on April 6th at our next legislative committee meeting, but we will look forward to seeing you in May. And thank you again for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks all. Talk soon.
Bye-bye. Thank you. I am going to turn over now, if I can, to Dr. Siebert. Chairman Apel had to leave, and I believe, if that's all right with everyone, that he will give the legislative update for Roanoke City Public Schools. Good morning, Dr. Siebert.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Mayor, members of council. Alan Siebert, Roanoke City Public Schools, and Board Chair Apel did give her regrets. She was able to be here for a piece of time, and so I will endeavor to cover the report that she wanted to provide this morning. As was shared with your consultant, as you work with your professional organizations, we also work with the Superintendent Association and School Board Association, but also have a good relationship with VML and VACO. Work a lot with Chairman Bennett with VACO and Ms. Bulova with VML, because we do obviously pull together on a whole lot of these topics. So what we just handed out for you is a little front and back summary of where things were as of like Thursday afternoon with the General Assembly session. As your consultant shared, we're in the last 2 weeks. We're tracking over 150 bills, but we have 19 that are part of our priorities. And these are bills that we either worked with legislators to introduce or are very active involved in drafting. So that's really what we wanted to speak our time on, plus a quick thing, a couple of quick wins from other priorities that we share with the City Council. So in terms of the 19 high priorities, we've successfully removed the word pilot from the Community Builders Program. We appreciated Mayor being present and helped bring comment when that was in the Senate subcommittee. We did not, Delegate Rasool did introduce a budget amendment to increase funding for that. The increase was not funded, but fortunately, as of Thursday afternoon, both House and Senate budgets had sustained funding that were in the governor's budget to maintain Community Builders Program. We've had a lot of success with continuing to help modernize the assessment program in the Commonwealth of Virginia. A bipartisan bill from Delegate Rasool and Senator Suderline to increase 3-year renewable licenses for teachers who teach dual enrollment and CTE programs. We're continuing to work on the what's the accountability system called the School Performance Support Framework. A really good report out of JLARC about recommended changes there, and Delegate Rasool had a bill to kind of implement some of those quickly, but now there's a little bit more optimism. Maybe the state board will be receptive, so it's more of a recommendation at this point. We obviously support indoor air quality, but we're working still very earnestly this week with Senate because an air quality bill had a zero fiscal impact for the Commonwealth, and for the Commonwealth it was zero. We're estimating $20,000 per elementary school, probably $50,000 per high school, and we see this as a very significant unfunded mandate when we already did tremendous HVAC modernizations using our ESSER funds, and so really concerned about that piece. As your consultant shared with you, we also spoke in support of the 1% sales tax option in both chambers, and are also watching, where that goes. Along the way, some other bills that are very closely related to our priorities come up. And one was Senator Pekarsky wanted to really have the state board and the department look at graduation requirements, and it had a number of elements in there, including how we wanted to support EL learners. But we leaned in and were able to get that amended to include that we're going to look at our SLIFE students. Those are our much older students who come to us, often refugee resettlement, have limited or interrupted formal education. So those were all really, really good things. The other thing that we're thankful for, and for this year, we'll have to wait for 2027, is the strategy that the board and the council had of saying thank you to our legislators who last year helped support locally appointed school boards. That seems to have worked really well, and even had one member of the Senate say that it was understood that maybe that helped to make no bills were introduced this year for that topic. So that was a good strategy. It seems to have been successful. And then I mentioned at the bottom there, the state funding for community builders is still there. Then there's, I have an attachment of those 19 bills where they were as of Thursday afternoon, but there's a whole bunch of others that we're watching and be happy to try to speak to. Lastly, I will say is, as your consultant shared about the differences between the House and Senate budgets, the $1.6 billion is a pretty big gap. And often when we see one party having both chambers, the House Senate budgets are a little more aligned. And as they outlined for you, that's that tax policy decision about whether or not to do the exemption for data centers. So before we actually have an idea of what's going to be for K-12 funding, they have to reconcile that piece. That $1.6 billion difference between the two chambers is huge. That will then lead to a compromise budget, which will lead to some actionable ideas for us. Of K-12 education, note, part of what the Senate wants to do with that $1.6 billion is take the teacher raise from 2% to 3%. But as you're already aware, any teacher raise for us is very problematic because, as the JLARC study showed 2 years ago, localities in the Commonwealth of Virginia are funding public education at $5 billion more than what the state says the minimum should be. And that's because the state's minimum is just woefully inadequate. So every locality in the Commonwealth exceeds that. That means that while the state share for either 2% raise in the House or 3% raise in the Senate would be only for those executive positions and only the state share for the local composite index. So whichever one of those comes forward leaves a pretty significant gap for us to figure out if we can do that. Again, the trade-off is if you don't match, then you leave state money on the table. And that's very disconcerting when we want to bring as much state money to the table as we can. The flip side is it requires eating more of our own guts to look for positions to be able to make that local match. So that's kind of where we are tracking, but a lot of it really depends on the tax policy decision between the that $1.6 billion between the two budgets. So we'll see how that goes. That's a top-level summary. I'm happy to answer any questions that Chair, Mayor, committee members may have.
Dr. Siebert, that was very helpful. Any questions?
All right. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Please give Ms. Apel our best. And sorry we missed her. With that, I believe that wraps up our business for today. Our upcoming meeting, as I mentioned, for the Legislative Committee is Monday, April 6th at 2026, not at 2026. The year will not change before then. Is there any other business before the committee today, or any final questions or comments? None. I will adjourn us until Monday, April 6th.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, and I will reconvene our City Council meeting to move into our briefings this morning. The first is our fiscal year 27 budget update, and I believe everyone received a packet on the dais with information to this, and I'll introduce our city manager, Ms. Turner, and her team for this report.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council. This morning, we want to brief City Council on FY 2026-27 budget development. This is the third briefing as we make progress towards balancing the budget and presenting the recommended budget to City Council on March 23rd. The first briefing provided information on the initial revenue projections and balancing status given identified incremental expenses. The second briefing focused primarily on capital improvement program. The agenda for today focuses on providing an update on the status of balancing the budget, revenue information to give context on the challenges we face, information on what the budget team focused on in making decisions on priority items to fund, revisiting the capital improvement program and recommended revisions, programs and services being recommended for funding based on budget requests, additional considerations on balancing the budget, and the remaining steps in the budget timeline. The environment and parameters that we work within have not changed since we began the budget planning and budget development process. Economic uncertainty. As we began budget planning, moderate or less than moderate growth in our revenue was anticipated. Based on the current revenue projections, revenue growth is less than moderate. Our ability to identify priorities is based primarily on the level of incremental revenue. While not impacting the FY 2027 budget, the meals tax sunset adds to future uncertainty as it will impact funding allocated to the operating budget and funding used to service debt for the deferred capital maintenance. Also, financial resources will not be sufficient to address all priorities. Programmatic expectations will need to be adjusted from the standpoint of current level of service and funding new priorities. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Kasecki, who will go over our preliminary balancing status. And we'll be tag teaming this as well as Ms. Catron, who will be going over our capital improvement program.
Thank you, Ms. Turner. Good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of City Council. To start off today's presentation, I'd like to take you back to January 20th, when we had our initial briefing. So we showed you the slides that are before you here, showing an $18.9 million deficit. So we've added, as you can see, another column there, where we are today. So in the next couple of slides, we'll be looking at some of the assumptions, recommendations, and considerations that we've used to close the gap to a $5.1 million deficit. Starting off with revenues. As Ms. Turner has already alluded to, revenues are currently moderate to less than moderate growth. And currently, we had a $12.833 million increase projected January 20th. And that is the same assumption we're going into. Again, if you remember the budget retreat presentation on November 8th, we had PFM, a consulting group, giving us a 10-year projection. And fiscal year 2027 was the first year where we'll start seeing a decline because expenditures were outpacing revenues. So it's the $6.226 million consists of your general property taxes, other local charges for services, for example, permits, fees, and licenses. And then your social services revenue, as you know, is the state-mandated reimbursable programs. And currently, those are remaining flat. However, after looking at some of the programming and consulting with Ms. Coleman, we do anticipate that number decreasing because of some of the federal programs that we will not get funding for. VDOT maintenance still remaining the same at $1.5 million, bringing us to that $12.833 million. Between now and when we adopt the budget, we still have some work to do to look at the final review of some of those taxes and revenues. However, we do not anticipate picking up enough to close the gap. So moving on to our expenditures, compensation package decreased from 9.5 to 7.7 million. And primarily, as we would like to aim for a 3% COLA increase, realistically, because of budget constraints, we have shifted to a 2%. We're still keeping up with our non-discretionary items, retirement rate contribution, medical, dental increase. We're still moving the employees that are below the 42,000 threshold, including the vacancies. Public safety step plan, and then your lapse decreased for $1 million. And if you recall, when Ms. Turner arrived, we had our lapse at approximately $6.5 million. And currently for fiscal year 26, it's at $6 million, and the plan is to decrease it further to another $5 million. We're carrying the mid-year adjustments, as you can see the bullet point there at the bottom, including the 27th payroll accrual that we've been building towards that is scheduled for July of 2028. In other expenditure requests, on January 20th, we highlighted $4.3 million in personnel requests, and these were primarily some of the departments are being proactive in moving the grant positions from your safer communities, safer grants, but also reclassifications that departments felt the need to request due to the increasing workload. However, at this point, due to, again, budget constraints, we're preliminary not funding those requests and taking it on a case-by-case. Current RCPS share still remains the same at an incremental $751,000 in addition to the $106.9 million. And that is due to general property and other local taxes not increasing. VDOT and social services, as I mentioned, primarily those reimbursable programs. There is a slight decrease there because of programs such as their federal resettlement that we are not anticipating on receiving. Technology maintenance contract, slight decrease there, but we're still picking up the bulk of some of the technology agreements that we've had. For example, social services have moved from their legacy system, Harmony, to Oracle, and also our payroll system is moving into Oracle. We also have Exeon, which is the body cameras for the police built into that. So as you can see, we're still picking up 1.2 million for this projection. Overtime and temporary wages, decrease of 1.9 to 539,000, because our shift currently is on public safety, and I'll cover that in the next couple of slides as well. We also have contractual fees for professional services, 1.3 to 488. Again, the strategy is to focus on those non-discretionary items. And then all other department requests, January 20th we presented, it was 5.6, and currently the proposal is at 488,000. And again, it's looking at everything that we need to do moving into fiscal year 2027. And last but not least, the debt service currently pending in outside agencies. So Ms. Catron will speak on some of the incremental debt service assumptions that we'll use that will be added to that list. Which brings us to a preliminary balancing status, 18.9 on January 20th to 5.1 as of today. So in looking at some of the highlights that we have for the revenues, as we mentioned from November 8th when we spoke to PFM and PFM presented, we recognized that real estate growth, while it's increasing by 6.55% for the assessment values, it started to decline compared to the last 3 to 5 years. Post-pandemic, real estate had increased approximately, we average about 9%. So that gives you a significance in how we've dropped in funding while it is still increasing. Sales tax remains flat at 6 months. Typically, we would pick up in December from Christmas shopping. In November, it'd be our Black Friday sales, but we're not seeing that growth as we did between 2020 and fiscal year 25. Personal property assessments are due after we propose the budget, and I think that is significant because we would have set the numbers, but also that last bullet point there, we decreased in our actual collection by 1.74% in personal property, which signifies where we are economically in terms of the growth. So under general property and other local taxes, so we wanted to show you the incremental growth that we've had from 21 to fiscal year 2027. So in looking at 21 to 22, general property and other local taxes combined increased by 8.2 million. From 22 to 23, it was 17.4. From 23 to 24, it was 22.8 million. 24 to 25, as you can see, 13.3. From 25 to 26, which is the current year, was 21.3. So before I get to the current year of fiscal year 26 and 27, between 21 and 25, we increased by $62 million. And if you recall, the prior council, we had 7 priorities, which started with education, community safety. We invested 35.9 in compensation, and education 21.4, increasing the RCPS share from 82 million to 106.9. For the current year, we're increasing our general property and other local by 5.4 million. And again, I refer back to the November 8th presentation. While we are recognizing an increase, priorities have started to shift. Current year and fiscal year 2026, we increased the mills tax, we increased the fire EMS fees. However, with the fiscal year 2027 increase and recommendations of expenditures of 31 million, we have to shift our priorities to accommodate those needs moving forward. So in looking at on the expenditure side, starting off with the compensation, as I mentioned, we're shifting our priorities from, again, the 3% would have been what we would have liked to do, but again, budget constraints and what we have to do moving forward in the next 3 to 5 years call for a decrease in our compensation package. So we're shifting it from 3 to 2%. We're still focusing on our retirement contribution rate increasing from 21.1 to 22%. Our medical and dental increase. Vacancy savings, again, that is the strategy to ensure that we have enough flexibility in the budget, so decreasing it by $1 million. And then the 27th pay period, which occurs every 8 to 10 years, currently scheduled for that July 2028. And just on average, we have 166 million personnel budget. And on average, it's about 8 to 10 million every pay period. So we need to have that in reserves to ensure that that 27 pay period does not affect the balance sheet and the fund balance. And the current strategy, Ms. Turno, that will speak on this in the next couple of slides, is to look at all the vacant positions and initiate a managed hiring initiative. So on the operating side, for the overtime and temporary wages, they're decreasing by from 1.9 to approximately 539,000. And because public safety accommodates 43%, so that is the main focus. While we did increase our meals tax by $2,022,000 to cover overtime and temp, and the other $2,022,000 for deferred maintenance, we spent $10.5 million in overtime and temporary wages in fiscal year 25. And like I said, 43% of that belonged to public safety. So the strategy is to ensure that if we cover public safety in the budget, we'll be able to cover every other department and navigate using either personnel lapse once you decrease it to a manageable number. Contractual fees for professional services, focusing on jail and medical contract, for example, fleet fuel cost, the marathon health contract that is increasing, fire EMS training center lease, which is increasing by $466,000. Juvenile detention center city share. So we took out debt to cover some of the structural issues and HVAC, and that share is increasing by over $300,000. And we're in agreement with Botetourt County as well as City of Salem. And I also included the technology maintenance contracts that I mentioned in the beginning, such as your Oracle and Exion. Last but not least, the all other department requests, January 20th, they were at 5.6 million and currently at 488,000. And this is because we're focusing on general services utilities, police vet services to supplement our share of the RCACP. So for example, there are some services that the RCACP does not cover, so the police department has to pay for. And in addition to that, the RCACP share is increasing by 357,000. And that is because 67% of the animals in the shelter belong to the city. This also includes your solid waste tipping fees, trash compact to lease, risk management, insurance premiums, and the economic development performance agreements that were pre-agreed to, such as Riverdale. So with that, I'd like to call Ms. Catron to go over the capital improvement program.
Thank you. So as we move into the capital improvement program, the next few slides, we will look at the revised CIP, the program, some of the program projects which were removed, and then incremental debt service. So last May, when you endorsed the CIP, when we built the fiscal year 26 to fiscal year 30 CIP, we didn't fully load the fiscal year 30 CIP. As you'll see, we did add the $5 million that we typically do for the schools, for the E911 center additional unit that we have a lease for. We did not build in any maintenance dollars for the adult detention center because there are extensive maintenance needs at the detention center. So we want to leave capacity in the out years to make sure that we address those needs. Also, as we built out the fiscal year 2026, 2030, we kept routine citywide projects such as the sidewalk, curb and gutters, street paving, streetscapes, to modernization of the traffic signals, and fleet park maintenance, along with keeping the technology improvements for the permit center and also for the mobile radios for the public safety and dispatch. And we continue to fund $1.5 million, as we usually do, for the Civic Center to arrive at that time, before the revised CIP, it was about $127 million that we would have to issue in debt. And we'll talk about the programs that were removed that accounted for the $50.4 million of debt that we wanted to save. So we do have two projects that remain that are grant funded. Those would be the two bridge projects. And we are cash funding about 4 million for the street paving and about 1.5 for the fleet replacement. So what we arrived at was about $76 million of debt that we would need to issue as part of the revised CIP. And again, that's about 50 million less than what we anticipated at the end of last fiscal year when we built out the fiscal year 26 through 2030 CIP. And why we reduced it is because of the 3 bands that we have to term out. So we have 3 bands beginning in fiscal year 2027, the 57.5 million band that we would need to convert from temporary financing to permanent financing. We have the $10 million which is the EDA Riverdale project that we would need to term out in fiscal year 2028. And we also have the deferred maintenance band that we took out in 2025. We need to convert that to permanent financing in the out year of 2031. So the bands alone is $92 million over the course of the next 5 years. And so what you'll see here is in fiscal year 2027 alone, we're looking at issuing debt of $75 million. And typically on any given year, we would average about $30 to $32 million worth of debt that we would have to issue. So essentially, we're about to issue 3 years worth of debt in 1 fiscal year. The other thing to note is in August of 2024, we did make a commitment of $3.9 million to purchase fire engines, and we didn't secure a financing source for those fire engines, so we will have to build that 3.9 on top of the $75 million in fiscal year 2027.
I'm sorry, would you like to do questions at the end or as we go along?
We can take questions.
Yeah, we can certainly take questions.
Okay. Could you say more about, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the $4 million for the 4 replacement fire engines. Could you explain to us what that is and how that happened?
Yeah, so again, in August 2024, I think the idea was to structure leasing around these fire engines. So we ordered the engines, and it takes a while for those engines to get built. So we are expecting those engines to come into this fiscal year. So without a funding source, the plan is to build it into the debt and issue debt to cover the $3.9 million that we need to pay for those fire engines.
So council approved that?
I'm not sure.
I don't think so.
I'm sorry. Mayor's okay. Sure. Yeah. I'm not sure if council approved that. We know through our research that it was approved in 24. Funding was not set aside for it. And in order, we're going to have to pay for it, or we'll have to pay a huge penalty. So we have to bake it into this now.
Doesn't council have to approve the spending over a certain amount, or how would that transpire?
So we will look and to make sure. I just don't want to speak out of turn because I don't have it in front of me to see if that in fact happened.
Follow-up question. My question was, how big is that fine? If we said, hey, we'll just pay the fine instead of, I'm just curious. I just want to.
30 to 40%.
I'm remembering right. There was also some savings of about $300,000 per fire truck if you ordered them in advance. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I believe, if my memory is right, which sometimes it's not, but I think something went to council in December of 2024. Is that correct?
I'm trying to remember.
And if I'm also remembering, there was some discussion about some third-party financing. So apparently that didn't happen.
Yeah, I would find it difficult to believe that we did not bring it to council, but I didn't want to speak out of turn.
It did. So basically what's going to happen is those numbers that you have up there are going to have to change. Because it's my understanding those fire trucks are coming, 2 is coming in June and 2 is coming in August.
Yes,
And I
ma'am.
don't think they're going to just give them to us without paying for them.
Right. So to your point exactly, on the 75.4 million that we would issue for fiscal year 27, we would issue the 3.9 million. And in the Davenport, when they came earlier in February and gave their presentation, that 3.9 is included in the incremental debt service numbers that we'll go over in a few slides.
But you will have to add it to these numbers that you're showing us currently.
That is correct.
Thank you, Ms. Powers, for that question.
Excuse me. What?
So thank you for clarifying that, because I do remember that it came to us. And I also remember that there was funding for it.
So it was approved, and one way or another, we'll figure that out, but we just never paid for them. And now we have to pay for them.
Yes.
We had actually talked about it. It was before I retired, and I want to say July, to see if we had money in any of our investment accounts. That's how I remember that they had also talked about getting a third-party financing. You know, like, and I don't really think it was called a lease, but I think they were gonna look at doing financing outside of the CIP.
Right.
But of course, I retired, and I don't know what they did after.
Okay. Yeah. We're good. Okay. Okay. So again, we became concerned with the ability to afford the incremental debt service. So what we did was we reached out to Davenport to give them a revised CIP, which is what we just went over, in order for them to run the numbers for debt service modeling. So the projects that we did remove include the projects that are listed here. And, you know, what we used as our focus points to arrive at least for the projects that remain, is any projects that we already had commitments and obligations to pay. We kept the citywide maintenance projects that you saw listed there, and then on the previous slide, and we also kept the technology projects that we had in play. So what was removed were the fire station number 2 on Williamson Road at 9.5 million. And then speaking with the engineering department, that estimate is actually moved up to about $12 million at this point. We also removed the Belmont Branch Library expansion, which is estimated at a $7.3 million replacement cost. Downtown pedestrian bridge renovation and the MLK pedestrian bridge renovations, along with numerous parks and rec projects, to arrive at the $50.4 million of debt reduction. So when Davenport came again in early February last month, they presented these incremental debt service numbers to you. And one of the strategies that they recommended was restructuring a part of our 2015-2016 debt to provide about savings of $3.5 million in the earlier fiscal years 27 through fiscal year 29, and shifting that debt service out to the later fiscal years of fiscal year 31 through fiscal year 36. So if you look at the right-hand column, which is the unmodified CIP without any debt restructure, that reverts our CIP back to what it was endorsed last fiscal year without any additional savings in the earlier year. So if you look at fiscal year 2027, you'll see that our incremental debt service over and beyond what we've already budgeted for in fiscal year 26 would add an additional $4 million in debt service. In fiscal year 2028, you're looking at an additional 6.4. In fiscal year 29, 3.4, 2030, 3.4, and in fiscal year 2031, 1.9, for a total incremental debt service increase of $19 million. If we look at the left column, which is the recommendation from Davenport, where we would go with the revised CIP that does remove some of the program projects and implement the debt restructure. In fiscal year 2027, our incremental debt service goes up to about $440,000. In fiscal year 28, 2.7 million. In 2029, 650,000 approximately. In fiscal year 2030, about 745,000. And in fiscal 2031, about $2 million in incremental debt service for an aggregate debt service over the next 5 years of $6.5 million. And in the middle column is in keeping the revised CIP, but not doing the debt restructure where we move the debt service out in future years. So again, in fiscal year 2027, our incremental debt would go up 2.4 million. Our incremental debt in 2028 would go up 3.8 million, so forth and so on, for a total of $6.9 million in incremental debt over the next 5 years. And so there's the line also for the penny equivalent real estate tax. So what that isn't saying, it isn't saying you need to increase your real estate tax by 5.8 or 6.4 or 17 cents. It's just telling the story of your revenue tax. That is how much you would have to dedicate in order to afford the incremental debt service over these years. And I just wanted to note that these numbers do not include the incremental mills tax that we're receiving, the half of the penny for the increase in mills tax. If that 0.5% was to increase or stay in place, it would help shave off about $2 million off of the 6.4, the 6.8, and the 19 million that you see listed. And the last point I just want to note was that these numbers also don't include any additional debt service that we would have to pay pending the sale of the Hotel Roanoke, because we do have that portion of the Hotel Roanoke Conference Center that we are carrying as part of on the city. So currently we're using the repaid dollars for that, but going forward, depending on the sale, we may need to assume that back, and the city would need to pay.
Thank you, Ms. Catron. Making significant revisions to the CIP is very difficult and challenging. We understand the disappointment and frustration, particularly to our constituency groups, for the projects that are recommended for removal. The focus on revising the CIP is to align the incremental required debt service with our budget reality. Even with the recommended revisions, a significant challenge remains with the required level of incremental debt service over the next 5 years. Again, we underscore and emphasize the parameters that we are working within have not changed. Less than moderate revenue growth impacts our ability to fund priority expenditure items. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, the remaining $5.1 million deficit reflects the difficult choices still before us. Over the next several slides, we want to walk you through the reductions that brought us from the original 18.9 million shortfall to where we are today, outlining the program services and personnel impacts that helped close the gap. We began with personnel, our largest expenditure driver. To manage the $5 million lapse budget, we're implementing a managed hiring strategy that frees us approximately 100 to 115 positions citywide. This is a multi-year, multi-pronged approach to reduce the budget to a manageable amount of approximately $2.5 million. In addition, we're not funding $4.3 million in new personnel requests, including positions affecting the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. I would like to just say a special thank you to our constitutional officers that have worked with us through this budget process. The request, it also impacts the request to add more armed security to our libraries due to increased facility usage. The request for fire EMS captain positions to oversee drug lockers at Station 4 and support the new pharmacy. It impacts the additional requests from Parks and Recreation for maintenance technicians for trailways, greenways, in-river kayak, and expanded amenities at Wasena, including staffing for the opening of Eureka Park. While these requests are not funded, we will use temporary assignments and strategic reallocations of existing vacancies to address the most critical service needs in the coming years. Beyond personnel, we review operating costs and have identified approximately $9.5 million in program and service reduction across public safety, infrastructure, community development, and general government. In public safety, the following adjustments will be recommended. Not funding the Sheriff's Office request to increase the city's VRS multiplier to match surrounding localities. This would be a cost of $347,000 in year one, which is expected to grow based on the contribution rate. For fire EMS, the reductions totaling $716,000 include not funding paramedic classes, the lease agreement increase for the new training center, and partially reducing the request for overtime and temporary wages. The strategy to absorb the $466,000 increase for the training center, we plan to freeze 4 positions. For the police department, we are partially funding overtime and temporary wages, leaving approximately $830,000 not funded. Within community development, primarily Parks and Recreation and libraries, we are primarily not recommending funding for $89,000 for youth athletic security costs, $31,000 for the extension of youth summer camp outdoor recreation program, $95,000 in equipment requests for landscape and park maintenance, $262,000 reduction in library books and subscription funding, representing the city share. Under infrastructure, we evaluated multiple options and are recommending a $625,000 reduction in fleet maintenance requests related to aging vehicles and part shortages, $150,000 reduction in capital building maintenance for internal repairs as we prioritize the use of the $25 million line of credit for major repairs such as elevators, roof units, and HVAC systems. A $62,000 reduction in base funding for encampment activities, and not funding a $200,000 request for a special events cruise. And an $86,000 reduction in base funding related to the pedestrian walkway bridge, police department, and employee health facilities as we review different strategies to continue these services. Finally, we are recommending a $35,000 reduction in funding for the Youth Summer Employment Program through Economic Development, which was previously partnered with that program with Goodwill Industries. A $292,000 reduction in the GRTC subsidy, reallocating those funds to higher priority needs. Additionally, the implementation of a new external agency process allowed us to cap all requests from agencies without formal agreements at $140,000. This provides the city with the flexibility of not increasing current funding levels within the base budget. These examples highlight some of the difficult decisions affecting valued community services. In closing, we have reduced the deficit from 18.9 to 5.1 million. The remaining gap reflects largely the non-discretionary costs, including technology maintenance contracts, mandated services, and contractual obligations. These decisions were not made lightly. Each reduction carries service impacts, and we recognize the challenges we are facing in fiscal year 2027. As we continue to meet with departments, our goal is to close the remaining $5.1 million gap. Our strategies will include reviewing all revenue for any potential growth beyond the projected $12.8 million, conducting a comprehensive review of all vacant positions to identify potential repurposing opportunities for the upcoming fiscal year, evaluate parks and library operations, including hours of operation, services, and programming, to identify strategic adjustments while prioritizing the opening of the Eureka Park Center. Review solid waste and custodial services for operational efficiencies. Remove select projects from the 5-year plan to reduce incremental debt service as presented on the prior slides, with the intent to revisit them as revenue allows. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Kosecki to walk us through the budget timeline before we open the floor for additional questions.
Thank you again, Ms. Turner. So in closing, in looking at the budget timeline, we had the budget retreat on November 8th, of course, and currently we've had a briefing in January, February, and of course today. So we will have one more briefing March 23rd, of course, that is a proposed budget. And after that, we will have 2 community meetings with locations. As you can see, April 9th, the first community meeting will be at the Williamson Library, and we will confirm the times for that in the upcoming briefing. And then April 16th would be at South Roanoke United Methodist Church. After which we'll have a public hearing on proposed budget and tax rates on April 23rd. March 4th, May 4th, sorry, we'll have the budget study and close it off with a budget adoption on May 11th. And I will open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kosecki. Thank you, Ms. Turner, and everyone for your hard work on this. We still have work to do. Thank you for really clearly laying out the challenges before us regarding revenue and expenditures. I'm going to turn to my colleagues for questions, and I'll just all right, Ms. Powers, do you have some questions at this point?
Well, I just want to say thank you for what you're doing. Yeah, I still have a lot of questions, and I'm sure the next meeting I will be able to get those gathered up. So this is pretty hard stuff, and I know you didn't take any of this lightly, as any of us did not take anything lightly, as we've had to make our own cuts that we've had to so far. I would just ask people to please be patient with us. Please understand. We welcome your suggestions, but I hope that we can all sit down at the table and work this out, because, you know, this is probably the hardest budget that I've seen, and I've been with the city now 45 years, and I think this is honestly the hardest. So I hope we can all respect each other's opinion and respect each other's decisions, because nothing's ever been meant to hurt anybody. It's just hard, because this would have been really easy to do. We could have increased taxes to our citizens, but we know they can't afford that, and we don't want to do that. So we have to take a look and make the very hard decisions. So I want to thank the staff, because I know you've done an incredible job, and I know how hard this has been for you. So I thank you very much for your work.
And that reminds me, Council, we do have the opportunity after each of these to submit questions that we have for follow-up. So I believe, Mr. Kosecki, you'll send out a reminder about that.
Yes, I will. Yep.
Yeah, and that's a great opportunity to do that, especially if we need additional information on items. Mr. Volleson?
I don't have any questions, but I do, similar to you, have a comment. I want to say thank you to Ms. Turner and your team, because this is a huge amount of trying to find where we can cut fat where fat doesn't exist. And we did that while still increasing our funding for schools. Let me repeat that. We have increased our funding for schools. So there'll be 107.7 million going to schools. And I also want, there's a narrative out there that that there's a gap of 35 million. That's not true. This year, compared to what the school formula was previously, the schools will only be getting $133,000 less than they would have under the previous policy. $133,000 less. So I really want to push back on this this narrative that has been out there that we're not doing anything to cut the budget in ours and that there's fiscal mess here at the city. It is something that we are definitely dealing with, and I thank Ms. Turner for showing where those cuts are being made, and I know that there are going to be additional cuts so that we can get down to that. This is a time when the schools in the city need to be working together to figure out where we can reduce the pain of both of our organizations. And so I just wanted to say that this has been a very good job of doing that while also trying to make sure that our schools are funded appropriately. And I think you've done a great balance of that.
Mr. Bollison, Mr. Nash?
I have a few questions and a few things to say. So number one, I'll kind of work backwards on my list here. You know, when we're looking at the areas and the services that we may have to make further cuts to, we're talking about things that are not just mundane. We're talking about things like libraries. We're talking about public safety. We're talking about public transportation, which are all critical to the fabric of our community, from the oldest citizen we have to the youngest citizens. I mean, with public transportation, think about the amount of people who get access to healthcare, access to work, connection to their family and friends by using public transportation. And we're making cuts to that when, if anything, we should be writing a blank check and handing over a blank check to fund public education, and along with our libraries. I mean, when I went to Melrose Library this past Saturday for a baby shower that was held in one of the community rooms, the library right there was packed. The inside of the library was packed with youth who go to the library and use the programming and the services that are offered there for free. And so thinking about having to change hours or change staffing, I mean, these are things that none of us want to do, but we're in the business on council of doing what is needed and necessary for the survival at this point of our city and to dig ourselves out of this hole. And so some of my questions, when it comes to personal property, I know there's been a decrease from the last year to this year. We don't really know yet where we're going to kind of finish up on that.
Right.
Is the decrease due to just a lack of collections, or is the decrease due to an actual decrease in the values that's being assessed when it comes to personal property?
That's a good question. And in looking at it's a two-parter. Looking at where we set our assessment, usually we average, after speaking to the Commissioner of Revenue, we usually implement like a 2% increase every year. That's standard. However, in just looking at where the estimates were compared to what we collected, we underperformed, but actual over actual, we also underperformed. So it is a combination of both that, again, the economy is bouncing back. And now at this point, of course, inflation is still high. We're not collecting as much as we projected we would. So we need to kind of pull back a little bit and assess what that incremental growth is going to be.
Thank you. For the mills tax in the sunset, I love and appreciate that you all are doing our budgeting very realistically, given the real factors and scenarios that we're dealing with. For the removal of that sunset, at what phase of the budgeting process do you all need that? Is that after you all present your final one that a council member needs to make a recommendation, or say like, hey, I think we should remove this sunset? Because I was against it from the beginning.
Well, if we think about it this way, July 1 would have a new budget, and the sunset's supposed to be right in time when we adopt the fiscal year 28. And if we do not have the 4,044,000 at that point, the issues that we've just highlighted basically double, because we'll need to cover whatever we funded for overtime and deferred maintenance and try and figure that out. So it would be after we adopt this budget. Yep, that would be ideal, Ms. Turner.
I agree.
And then my last question is, when we're looking at the economic development project for the
For the
Riverdale,
yes.
that's the 10 million that we have to
Correct.
start paying on
Yes.
in FY 27.
Correct.
And that
FY28.
FY28, but we, they do get a tax rebate, and we have to build that into the budget.
what is it? When you say tax rebate, I guess that's the part that
So we rebate them back the real estate taxes they pay.
okay.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Good. All right, Vice Mayor.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I find this just, well, I shouldn't say I find this very upsetting, the cuts that we're proposing. I note again that it feels to me like a disproportionate falling down on Parks and Recreation, which I don't see having ever recovered from our austerity cuts of 2008, 2009. And I'm worried about the implications, the unforeseen impacts that this will have on our communities kind of across the board. So I look forward to the next budget work session. I'm just not sure, for some of us that are barely making ends meet and paying our property taxes, when we talk about low growth, and it sort of, for me, it feels like property taxes have gone up a lot in this city over the last so many years, and that we saw a huge amount of money come into the city. And for it to stabilize, mine went up 20% last year. This year, 7%. So I don't feel like that's a low, to me, that's still kind of a lot. I wouldn't want my real estate valuation going up 7-10% every single year personally. So I don't know. I'm just thinking about, do we have a revenue problem, or do we have spending and accountability problems and things that we need to address? Because we have some of the highest property tax rates in the state of Virginia. And that is crushing to a lot of our working class families. And the reason that I think a lot of people are moving here, to sort of segue, is because of our high quality of life. We have a lot of challenges in the city of Roanoke, and yet people are still moving here because it is a nice place to live. We have high poverty, we have pockets of high crime, and it's a nice place to live. Why are people moving here? I think they're moving here because of the amenities that we offer. Good schools, great library system, robust parks and recreation. What I see is that we are losing a little bit of sight of how we invest and take care of that. And I just want to encourage my colleagues and all of us to work together to find our way out of this in a way that we don't look back in 5 or 10 years and realize that we're worse off because we have gutted critical services, amenities, and possibly raised taxes, which I feel like is something that's going to come our way as a recommendation. And I think that'll drive even more people out of the city. We have lots and lots and lots of neighborhoods with empty, underutilized, vacant, blighted properties. And just to the extent that we can really stay focused on revitalizing those and getting those empty homes reoccupied, I think we can see a lot more revenue growth. So thank you for letting me say that. I'm very frustrated. I appreciate everyone's work on this. I also share Councilmember Powers' sentiment. I'm not going to be able to support a property tax increase. I think we should be looking to actually lower that. And so I appreciate your work, and I know that we will get through it together, but I think this is really frustrating for me, and I know that it is for a lot of our residents because I've heard from them. So thank you.
Vice Mayor, Councilwoman Sanchez-Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Kanseki. I do have a question. Why do we need security at a youth event, sporting event? Why do we need security?
You'd be surprised.
So that event is, I think it's through the RCPS schools, and it is a request that came through providing that initiative. So,
thank you.
Parents fight Ms. Sanchez-Jones sometimes.
It's a shame.
Mayor, Vice
It
Mayor,
is a
members of
shame.
council, it is my understanding through communications with Parks and Recreation that for, say, basketball, renting the gymnasiums with Roanoke City School, that they've asked us to have security on site for those events.
Mr. Hagan.
To reiterate, thank you all for the enormous work that you all have done. I agree with Vice Mayor on a lot of this, and I'm going to keep my comments brief because if you can't tell, my voice is going out. But yeah, I think that one of the large concerns is that we will shoot ourselves in the foot in the next 5 to 10 years. But yeah, so just look forward to seeing everything as we move forward and hearing from citizens. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you all for your questions. I'll just follow up with a couple things. I think it's important that we remember the big picture and that sometimes the big picture changes. On the projections, I appreciated on page 10, yeah, I'm looking at it. Sorry. On page 10, I appreciate this kind of overview of where we have seen increased revenue growth and what that has allowed us to do. I think that's an important reminder. Even during, and this is outside of ARPA funding that we were able to utilize for one-time projects. But we made a commitment 5 years ago to really address compensation for our employees. And we're continuing to build that plan out. And so some of the implications here are either pausing that growth in support of our employees for a year, 2 years, it's hard to tell, or continuing to find a way to meaningfully sustain that, but do it at a slower rate. To continue to find a way to support at a level that we can sustain growth for investment in our public schools. That's one of our big challenges as well. And then along with this, as we think about revenue, we're really limited in our ability to increase or generate revenue as a locality. Probably the three largest revenue buckets are real estate, personal property tax, and sales tax. We don't have the ability as a locality to just raise the sales tax. That's authority given us by the General Assembly. So we really have the personal property tax rate and the real estate tax rate, which the rate we have not raised on real estate, we've not raised in over a decade. And the personal property tax rate has been that way probably since before I was born. It has not changed. So that's 64 years. We've talked today about the implications of either raising tax rates, which nobody wants us to do, and we also have heard the question raised about reducing those tax rates. So it's a difficult question about balancing. We're limited in how we can generate revenue, and if we reduce those revenue sources, then the deficit that we have already thoroughly gone through today will increase. So that's just a reminder to us as we're thinking about that. So I think another important point that's been raised today, the Vice Mayor talked about this, is, and Councilman Nash, how do we grow our tax base? Blighted properties, how do we get those back online for tax revenue? We've started looking at the amount of money in tax exempt properties that we give. And this is a hard thing for nonprofits to hear, but we have to seriously look at that. We have the building across the street, which we're grateful that Roanoke City Public Schools is there, but when that was purchased, it came off our tax rolls, and that was about $250,000 a year. So there's a give and take in this process that we have to think about. And I know we've been revisiting some of those tax exemptions. We have a new process in place for that. When we're considering these performance agreements and tax abatements and tax rebates, we have to think about that. There's the plus side is the economic growth and development incentives. The downside is the longer-term loss of revenue. So all of that on the revenue side is something that I think we have to keep in mind as we go through this. The other thing we need to keep in mind is just the overall state of the economy. We, about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, there was a projection that we might hit another recession. We haven't really hit a recession, but we have seen inflation. So the costs of everything has gone up. We saw that reflected today in the information about Fire Station 2, going from, I don't know, 9 million up to 12 million. And anything construction related, we're going to see those costs go up. And that's whoever you are. It's local government, it's businesses, it's school districts, it's all of that combined. So as we look on the reduction side, we also have to think about balancing significant reductions or sustained reductions so that we can still sustain the services that we need. And that to me is kind of one of the big questions that we're facing today. And that is, what essential services might see reduction in delivery? So to just give an example, it might mean that trash, instead of being picked up every week, is picked up every 2 weeks. It might mean that the recycling schedule changes. It might mean that, as we already saw, a reduction in some of our fleet that helps deliver community safety. So these adjustments affect people and they affect services. Now, we haven't made any final decisions yet, but that's the reality that we're living within. And some things that we haven't even talked about. Just looking ahead. Security enhancements to this building. This building is like 30 years behind in upgraded security. And in order to upgrade this building to the level of all of our schools, the courthouse, it's going to take a lot of money to do that. We haven't even talked about how much that might cost. Housing initiatives. We've talked about affordable housing. We've talked about piloting tiny home villages to reduce our unhoused population crisis that we're in. That's going to cost millions of dollars. Collective bargaining. The projected costs, we talked about the fact that that's likely to move forward. That's going to impact local government. It's going to impact schools. That's millions of dollars. And I've heard a range anywhere from $10 million to $100 million. And that's an add-on that we haven't discussed. Councilman Nash, did the math, and that revenue from cannabis is not nearly what we projected it might be. So that's another challenge. So we're in a quandary here, and it's painful, it's difficult, it's challenging. I believe we can find our way through it. We're all going to have to make different types of sacrifices here, but I appreciate that we're all engaged in this work, and we care about it, and we want to see our city be healthy and whole. And I think it's going to also call on us as localities in this region to think differently about how we work together. That the challenges we face as a city may be unique to us as a city, but we're a part of a region. And so I think whether it's housing, it can't just be on Roanoke City to think of ways to create more affordable housing. It's got to be Salem and Benton and Roanoke County and Botetourt County and Franklin County. I appreciate the support we've gotten for, the airport expansion, and hopefully we can find some federal dollars for that and tap into those. But as I mentioned earlier, if we see cuts on a federal level, that's going to impact our schools significantly. That's going to impact us significantly. And what is an epidemic or a crisis now is going to be catastrophic. So these are really difficult times that we're in. And I appreciate everyone's integrity and thoughtfulness as we're looking at this, and for the above and beyond hours that you all are putting in as a team. I know we're going to get there. And it's going to be challenging and difficult and probably painful. But we have to remember that we're all human beings. Ultimately, we all care about each other. Ultimately, we all believe in each other. And to the extent that we can call on each other's better angels to show up during this process, I think we'll get there, and we'll see a pathway forward that will make a significant difference. So thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Kosecki.
Any other questions?
How are you going to promote those community meetings regarding the budget?
Our new public information officer and her team will be putting them out.
Okay, thank you.
And that's a good reminder, Ms. Sanchez-Jones. For the public, Mr. Kosecki alluded to these earlier, but on April 9th, there will be a community meeting at the Williamson Road Library. That time is yet to be determined, but we will put out a lot of information about that. I think it would also be helpful to make sure we release that to the media so they can help us publicize it. April 16th, we'll have a community meeting at South Roanoke United Methodist Church. April 23rd is our public hearing on this, and then our budget study where we can hear all of that feedback and get an update. Then the budget adoption would be May 11th.
Yep.
Thank you for that. All right. Thank you, Mr. Kosecki and Ms. Catron. Our next item, our next briefing this morning is the fiscal year 27 strategic priorities. Council will remember that we had not only a budget retreat last fall, but also a strategic priorities retreat. And this is a continuance of that. This is an important part of our work together because the budget that we adopt in many ways reflects our strategic priorities. So, Ms. Turner,
I'm going to turn it over to
Ms. Vernon.
Ms. Vernon.
Good morning, Mayor Cobb, Vice Mayor McGuire, and members of council. This morning, we would like to provide you with a brief overview and recap of the work performed by City Council on last year in the development or redevelopment, if you will, of the City Council's strategic priorities. We want to use this opportunity to share with you the progression that has been made with the city department leaders on the development of performance metrics and activities tied to the proposed strategic priorities. We will also share with you the software solution, dashboard if you will, that would be used to track the performance metrics. And lastly, we'll ask for your formal approval on the redevelopment of the strategic priorities. As Mayor Cobb had shared with you, you may recall on last year, you actually hosted 2 retreats, one in the springtime, whereby we had a guest facilitator, and we collaborated with the Weldon Cooper Center for Public Service for the Virginia Institute of Government to provide a facilitator to review some of the following: orienting council on local government authority and your roles and responsibilities, and those of the appointed officials in order to be efficient and effective as an elected body. Enhance awareness and shared understanding of council members' communication and behavioral styles and leveraging that information and knowledge as a cohesive team. Governing as a highly effective team. And last but certainly not least, redefining and develop City Council strategic priorities focused on measurable future outcomes to provide guidance to the city's leadership. Each of you were interviewed by the facilitator to understand what your desired outcomes were for the retreat and opportunities that you saw. A tremendous amount of progress was made at both retreats, and you were able to provide guidance to administration. The consultant did an outstanding job based on your feedback of helping guide you in both the spring and the fall session to refining the city's strategic priorities. During the retreat, City Council was able to work through the organizational goals and build out strategic priorities and desired outcomes. Based on the work conducted by City Council, City Administration has synthesized that information provided, defined the strategic goals, created objectives, engaged with the city directors to develop activities for each strategic goal, and determine how best, if you will, to track the performance. The current 2025-2026 strategic priorities are listed on the screen here, and these were adopted in 2023. We have had these priorities for the last few years, and in 2023, Council adopted the Star City Strong Strategic Plan for the fiscal year 23-24. This plan served as a roadmap for achieving a safe, caring, and economically vibrant community. It identified 7 key strategic areas: community safety, economy, education, good government, human services, infrastructure, and livability. The strategic plan emphasized equity, community engagement, well-being, and creativity as guiding principles for action and decision-making while addressing emerging challenges and opportunities. During the retreats hosted by Council on last year, Council looked again to refine the strategic priorities. As shared, our guest facilitator helped Council determine that the priorities needed to be reduced and more concise. Another need was clarity on the strategic priorities and the desired prioritization. Council wanted to ensure that the goals were impactful and influenced change within our community, for our residents, and for the organization. As our economy, community, and workforce evolves, it was also important that Council ensure organizational agility while aligning resources with the goals. Council was very proactive. You dedicated quite a bit of time during both retreats. Out of all the agenda items, that was the key agenda item: refining the priorities and helping prioritize the strategic goals. However, it was very clear from Council that all goals were important and critical. The following priorities were determined: civic stewardship and infrastructure, community and economic vitality, community safety, healthy and sustainable communities, and education. And these are in no particular order because Council had identified all of these were important. In conclusion of the retreat, Council was able to validate their shared values and goals, and Council's efforts aim to strengthen civic engagement, deliver exceptional results for our residents, build and maintain quality infrastructure, promote community and economic growth, ensure the well-being and safety of our community, continue to foster educational success and access, and focus on the quality of life for all in order to create a healthy and sustainable community. Essentially, all of these efforts offer measures that further the vibrancy of the city of Roanoke, urban community, enhancing and strengthening neighborhoods, ensuring best practices within the organization, diversifying our economy, and growing industries, commend and recognize our business community, prioritizing quality infrastructure, environmental sustainability, and providing opportunities for all in our community to live, learn, work, play, and prosper. These priorities were reduced from 7 to 5, and those are the priorities highlighted there, as well as their definitions. Based on the insight provided from the Council retreats, we later had a 2-day Directors Fall Retreat in October, where leadership processed, created, and developed actions to deliver on Council's priorities. These priorities were further defined to capture the vision of Roanoke City Council and to provide staff and the community with guidance on the steps for fulfilling their vision. The strategic priorities developed by Council shares not only the direction for the community and organization, it also provides direction on decision-making, related to budget resources, policies, programming, and how best to prioritize the needs of the community. City administration and leadership, in its review of council's strategic priorities, has converted the council's vision into smart, measurable actions and tasks to guide departmental work and ensure coordinated service delivery for the community. On this slide is the implementation matrix, and you have a copy before you. And as you can tell, this is an 11-page document that goes through each of the priorities. The plan also captures timeframes for the activities, be it short-term, long-term, or mid-term, and it allows for transparency as well as collaboration across city departments. We'll now transition, and I'll bring forward our IT manager, Mr. Jared Anthony from the Department of Technology, and he's going to walk us through the dashboard for performance metrics.
Thank you, Angela. And good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council, Ms. Turner, Ms. McCoy, Ms. Greeny. So now we've talked about, we'll keep that on. Now we've talked about the goals for the city, but in the implementation matrix, but how can we track our performance and get that information to the stakeholders? That's where performance metrics come in at. Bring back the slide for just a second. So basically, we want to track what we do and how well we do it. And the first few slides will be review from our fall 2024 presentation. And then we're going to actually see a demo of what we've done so far since our last meeting. So let's talk about metrics in local government. What do we want to track in local government and why do we want to do it? Some of these topics are actually brought up earlier in the day's meeting. We talked about transparency, provide clear insights into government performance, accountability, informed decision-making. How can we put the data in city leaders' hands to make decisions? Can we show areas in which are meeting goals, other areas that are lagging behind, and how can we shift the resources around? And then also a big goal of the city is always continuous improvement. We really want to always be regularly updating metric areas for growth and optimization. So what are dashboards? You've probably seen them by now, various other localities' websites, and we'll look at ours in a second, but we've got dashboards are digital platforms that display real-time or periodic data, and they're interactive and accessible. We want to make them very user-friendly, and sometimes you can click into more details and customizable. Basically, all localities, a lot of different dashboards, do it their own way that meets their particular needs. In some of the Virginia localities that currently use dashboards, we have found Williamsburg, Alexandria, Fairfax County. I'm sure there are more, but those are some of the ones that we quickly identified. We've met with Tempe, Arizona. Tempe, Arizona has a very robust dashboard, and they've won several awards for them. So we've met with them in the past, and they've given us some tips and tricks. We've also noticed a trend in local governments using more dashboards. For example, what we do in the Department of Technology is we participate in something called Digital Cities programs through an organization called Government Technologies. And each year, this organization produces a list top 10 localities for each size based on how innovative they're using their technology, how well they're using technology, and meeting standards. And so we've noticed that some of the winners in the last couple of years have really been starting to implementing these dashboards. Now, we will have to point out this program has been going on for 24 consecutive years, and to my knowledge, Roanoke City is the only program, the only city that has been top 10 every single year. So that's something, one of many things we have to be proud of in the city. Okay, so we're going to get this data for these dashboards. We've got several different options. We'll really realistically use most of these. We've got our city systems. Think of our public safety systems, like our computer-aided dispatch or police record systems. We also have financial data or permit data. Just for an example, just to see if we could do it, we've taken a list of our permits issued by month. You can click on them and actually bring that up on a map. That's just a draft stage, but it's just an example of what we can do with the data that we have at our disposal. We also have census data. Good thing about census data, there's a lot of it. Bad news is sometimes it falls a little bit behind. It's officially only every 10 years, but there are some, like I think it's called ACS, is a program the government uses to kind of estimate along those ways at certain intervals. We can use that. Social services has their data that they can provide. We also can get data from the schools as well as the water authority. So we've put together a mock dashboard, and just a reminder, this is the draft stage, it's not public yet, but you can see we've already kind of, modeled it after the new strategic areas. So I'm going to bring that dashboard up now. Great, thank you. Let's do a brief demo. So as you can see here, I'm just going to click on your community and economic vitality. And we have various different metrics. Some of these, as you can see, comes from the census data, local government. And then we also have civic stewardship and infrastructure. And these are some metrics that we've previously gone over with council that they'd be interested in seeing. So I can come in here and look at a tile and I can see when it's last measured. So look at capital improvements, for example. We can look at the chart and seeing the actual expenses that are for that category. We can see if we happen to have a target, we can have a target. We also have a little blurb helping users of the program understand what exactly this metric is and what it's trying to do. So that's just a brief demo. Like I said, this is still currently in the draft stage, but if you need to see a further demo or permission to see it, just reach out and we can work with you on that. And I want to take this time to really thank one of my colleagues, Olivia Eaton. She is our GIS leader for the city, GIS being Geographic Information Systems, and she's the one who has put this together, and she does really good work for us. We've got a lot of exciting projects coming ahead for data and geographic information. So I'll turn it back over to Angela at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Anthony. And I too wanted to commend the team, the Department of Technology. We've been working on this since last fall after our director's retreat. And Mr. Anthony and Ms. Eaton have been great to work with and really worked in developing this. Also want to thank our city leaders, our department directors who have been tasked with identifying 5 metrics. And for some, that was very challenging. I think Fire had shared with me they have about 34, and how could they possibly get it down to 5? But the intent was something that certainly our community wants to know, that council is interested in understanding. And then there are efforts, once we get through this transition, to also have an internal dashboard. So those metrics are still important, but really trying to be very intentional about what is important to council and what is important to our community. So thank you again to the Department of Technology. So next steps in terms of what we're asking for today, we are asking that council formally approve and adopt the strategic priorities as presented today at their next council meeting on March 16th. We're also asking that that would be effective with the fiscal year 26-27. Actions for us to take as a city leadership would be to incorporate those updating our city, our budget once those are approved by City Council. So we would make the necessary updates to incorporate those priorities into our budget. We would also move forward with updating the strategic plan and confirm performance metrics in partnership with our department leadership. And then I'll open it up for any questions that you may have or comments.
Thank you, Ms. Vernon.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Powers?
I just want to say thank you. I'm excited that I had the opportunity to participate in this. I think it was really good for us all to be able to sit down and think about these strategic priorities. I think everybody did a great job. I'm excited to see how we move forward with this, and hope that it is something that we can make sure that we continue to do for many years to keep it updated. And I thank the city staff and Ms. Turner for their work in getting this completed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Allison?
It's the morning, so you can't see my excitement.
Okay. The dashboard did it, right?
Yes. I've been talking about the dashboard for quite some time, so I'm very excited to see it now matched up with our strategic plan, and that those we've got a mock-up now, and I'm sure we'll have the final version soon. So I wanted to thank Ms. Bohr for her work on that, and also Ms. Olivia back there. I know that from firsthand experience that dealing with GIS data all day long can sometimes be monotonous. So thank you for your work in getting all the data cleaned up and ready to go for Ezra to use. And I think this is going to be very important. To be able to use data to make evidence-based decisions is really important to cities. A lot of times we have what we hear, and then numbers are really what help us make the decision. And so I really appreciate the work on this.
Others? Okay. Just two quick things. For the dashboard to be online, are we hoping that that will coincide with the launch of this?
That would coincide with the budget.
Okay,
So
July 1.
July
Okay,
1.
great. And then I noticed in looking at the strategic priorities, many of these, as council members look through, are very robust, and others have space for expansion. So please take a look at these, and I would suggest even before we bring these back for adoption, that if you have additional recommendations, to please share those with staff so that we can work to include them in this document. And I know it's a living document.
Yes, sir.
As these priorities are living priorities. So there's always room for us to be able to adapt these and strengthen them. So, all right, thank you, Ms. Vernon.
All right, thank you.
All right, well, thank you everyone for your attention this morning. And before we recess for our closed meetings, I did want to acknowledge Ms. Laura Carini, who this is your first meeting as our new city attorney. So welcome and congratulations.
Thank you, Mayor.
And we will be in recess until 2:00 p.m. for our series of closed meetings, and we'll see everyone back at 2:00 this afternoon.